cash? Text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
it's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. What a show we've got for you today. All eyes are on 4 p.m. today as Nigel Farage makes the hugely anticipated emergency general election announcement in London, and with speculation running rife that Nigel is set that he will announce, after all, to stand as an MP. We'll have full analysis and, of course, cover that announcement live with an interview as well with Nigel Farage later in the show. And while Rishi Sunak will surely be nervously keeping an eye on Nigel's big announcement, he's been at a sports centre today, and the Tories have today pledged to protect women's rights, in the course of which they've been accused of stoking a culture war. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer is spending today trying to convince the electorate that Labour would go nuclear on defence, despite twice backing Jeremy Corbyn for Prime Minister, who pledged to scrap UK's Trident plan. Can we trust a Labour Party on defence? And rugby league legend Rob Burrow has sadly passed away, aged just 41, after a brave battle with motor neuron disease. We'll pay tribute to the Leeds Rhino star and talk to former teammates. That's all coming up in your next hour. Well, welcome to the show. To stand or not to stand, that is the big question. And at 4 o'clock today, Nigel Farage will answer it here on GB News. We'll find out, will Nigel Farage stand in the next general election after all, despite saying he wouldn't and despite losing on 7 previous occasions? What changed his mind? We'll have the full analysis. We'll be there live. We'll have an interview with the man himself. Get in touch. The big question I want you to answer today, should Nigel Farage stand as an MP? He said 6 weeks wasn't long enough. Well, now it's only about 4.5 weeks. But could he still do something to convince you to change your vote? We've got an exclusive poll out. I'll tell you about that later in the show, how you intend to vote. But that could change. All bets might be off at 4 p.m. today. Get in touch with your views, gbnews.com/your say. Get stuck in. I'll read as many as I can before the end of the show. But first, it's your headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Hi there, good afternoon to you. It's 3:02. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Rishi Sunak's denied he's stoking a culture war with his pledge to amend the Equality Act. The Prime Minister wants to make clear sex means biological sex rather than gender and says the current confusion over the legal definition can't be allowed to continue. The proposals would allow organisations to bar transgender women from single-sex spaces, including hospital wards and sports events. Labour's called the policy an election distraction. The Lib Dems say there's no need to unpick the Act. But Rishi Sunak says the Conservatives are trying to clarify the law rather than change it.
So the Equalities Act was passed over a decade ago, and what's clear today is that there's a lack of clarity in the law, and that's risking the safety of women and girls. So we've announced the bold action that we would change the law, change the Equalities Act so that sex means biological sex. And what that will do will mean that providers of single-sex services and single-sex spaces will be able to protect women and girls and ensure their safety and security.
Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer says Labour is totally committed to the security of the nation and to the UK's nuclear deterrent. He's described the Trident programme as a fundamental, vital part of our defence. Labour are pledging to build 4 new nuclear submarines and increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP when and economic conditions allow. The Conservatives say they'll meet that target by 2030. Sir Keir has dismissed concerns. His shadow Foreign Secretary and the Deputy Party leader voted against the UK having nuclear weapons just 8 years ago, and he's criticised the Tories for politicising the issue.
Prefer if politics were kept out of this issue, even at this election. Throughout the whole of this Parliament, I have deliberately not been partisan over security. Yet just before this election, the Tories questioned this Labour Party's commitment to national security. And I will not let that stand. The people of Britain need to know that their leaders will keep them safe, and we will.
The Liberal Democrats are vowing to tackle water pollution as part of their manifesto. They've announced plans for a new protected blue flag status for rivers, with legally binding targets to prevent sewage dumping and also special protection for swimmers and wildlife. It would include the expansion of marine protected areas to cover at least 50% of the UK territorial waters by 2030. Lib Dem Deputy Leader Daisy Cooper says it will benefit everyone.
And we've been leading the campaign to end the scandal of raw sewage dumping. Here in Henley, local residents know all about that. They know that the sewage dumping is bad for wildlife. They know that it's causing real problems with tourism as well. And people want to see an end to this particular scandal. That's why today Liberal Democrats are announcing our plans to introduce a blue flag status to protect local rivers.
Now, turning to the news you've heard a moment ago about Nigel Farage, he's fuelled speculation he'll stand as a Reform UK candidate after saying he'll make an emergency general election announcement later. The party's honorary president has previously stated he would instead focus on getting Donald Trump re-elected as US president. Mr Farage has stood and failed 7 times to gain election as an MP. You can watch that here on GB News at 4 o'clock. Friends and fans of Rob Burrow have paid tribute to the unassuming lad with a superhero origin story following his death at the age of 41. Burrow's passing was confirmed by Leeds Rhinos on Sunday following a lengthy, high-profile battle with motor neuron disease. He raised awareness and millions of pounds for charity. Well-wishers have gathered outside Headingley Stadium in Yorkshire to pay their respects, laying flowers, scarves and other tributes. The Royal College of Nursing is warning patients are dying in hospital corridors, describing the problem as a national emergency. The union says people are being treated in unsuitable spaces, including cupboards and car parks, for long periods of time, and may even undergo cancer diagnosis or intimate examinations there. Almost 3/4 of 11,000 frontline staff surveyed say the care they're delivering in public places compromises patient privacy and dignity. And 4 members of a dog-fighting ring, including a kingpin known as Dr Death, have been sentenced for a string of animal welfare crimes. Chelmsford Crown Court heard dogs were given brutal training regimes and then starved to make fighting weights before being put in bouts where they fought sometimes to the death. The ringleader, Philip Ali, was sentenced to 5 years in prison, while the other gang members received sentences for offences under the Animal Welfare Act. We'll have much more on the day's news in our later news programmes, or you can get more right now by scanning the QR code or signing up to the GB News alerts. The details are also on our website. Now it's back to Martin.
Thank you, Aaron. Now, of course, there's only one place to start today, and that's with Nigel Farage. The honorary president of Reform UK will make what he's called an emergency general election announcement today at 4 p.m. And Farage said last week that he wouldn't stand at the general election because of the very short notice. Well, he's been a UKIP candidate at 5 general elections and 2 by-elections, and he lost every single one of them. So what is different this time? Well, I'm joined in our studio by our political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, welcome back to the studio. You've been out for the last 2 weeks with the Tory party. We'll come to that.
And the Labour Party.
And the Labour Party. We'll come to that in a bit. The rumour mill has gone into overdrive. Everyone is saying he's going to stand, and most likely in Clacton. What are you hearing?
Into a becalmed election pond has landed a large Farage-sized rock. That's what happened, Martin, today. It wasn't expected. We had talk about what is a woman on the Tory party going off the culture wars battle, etc., etc. Then we had, in the north of England, we had a triple defence lock from the Labour Party talking about how they're going to commit to maybe a defence review, which could lead to increased army size, and so it goes on to nuclear weapons. And then Farage announces on Twitter he's going to do some announcement at 4 o'clock, an emergency election announcement. We don't know what it is, so let's speculate, shall we? Give me a chance to speculate on your show, Martin. Last Wednesday, you heard him tell Harry Cole, I'm open to offers from the Tory party. Nothing happened. The next day, he tells Question Time it was banter. Well, it wasn't banter. If you heard him say, he was basically announcing in real time on a media chat.
What's in it for me?
What's in it for me? What he meant there was, he saw what Labour are up to. We need to stop Labour, he would say. Friday happens, the GB News MRP poll drops, giving Tories down to top of 70 or 80 or so MPs. Labour miles ahead. Reform 0 MPs for 12% of the vote. Sunday's Times newspaper, Farage says he wants to take over the Tory party. Monday happens. Well, how you do that? You get onto the field of play. So the rumour mill is in overdrive that he's going to announce standing as an MP, possibly in Clacton. His old friend Aaron Banks, you know him too, don't he? Funded the UKIP party and Brexit party, or donated to the Brexit party, but certainly the UKIP party. Surveyed Clacton back in January, found out that if he stood in Clacton, he'd win his seat. Clacton is the only seat won in a general election by a UKIP MP at the time. That was Douglas Carswell. All roads are leading towards one conclusion, but we don't know yet till 4 o'clock.
But you will be there live at the scene at 4 o'clock. You'll have that announcement info, and you'll grab an interview with the man himself. Well, Chris, don't go anywhere. I'll come back to you in a moment. The speculation grows that Nigel Farage will do an about turn and announce he is going to stand in the upcoming general election. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has reiterated his stance that a vote for anyone other than a Conservative will help Sir Keir Starmer get the keys to number 10.
At the end of the day, on July 5th, one of 2 people will be Prime Minister, either Keir Starmer or me. A vote for anyone who's not a Conservative candidate is just a vote to put Keir Starmer in number 10. So if you're someone who cares about tackling migration, both the boats and legal migration, if you're someone who wants a more proportionate, pragmatic approach to net zero that saves people money, and if you're someone who wants lower taxes, it's only the Conservatives that are going to offer all those things, and that's the choice at this election. Lower taxes with the Conservatives, a plan to stop the boats, legal migration coming down, and a sensible way to get to net zero that saves people money. That's what we offer. Keir Starmer doesn't believe in any of those things, and that's the choice that people should consider.
OK, Chris Hope is still with me in the studio. Chris, you've been out there on the front line for these past couple of weeks with the Conservatives and the Labour Party. I've been in the studio talking with you. From where I'm sitting, this is all starting to feel a bit robotic.
He's enthusiastic. He's up for it. They're trying to show youth to voters, GB News viewers, against the elderly Keir Starmer. They call him Sleepy Keir, and the rest of it in a briefing to the newspapers. Starmer's 60 or 61, 20 years older than Rishi Sunak. So he's enthusiastic. When he meets people, he wants to hear what they're doing. He gets excited when he does a bowling ball and he gets near to the jack, or I've watched him successfully obviously thread some form of wiring for a raw broadband box. He was delighted to get that right, and you know, you can't fault the man for trying, but he has called an election when his party is 20 points behind in the polls, and it may be not enough to do it. Today he was in Henley. Now, why are the Tories campaigning in Henley? That should be a seat they should be holding. We saw Daisy Cooper on the news there. She's in Henley because they want to win it for the Tory party. But the Tories are in a seat they should win anyway.
And they're in 18 out of 20 seats they campaigned in so far are actually safe Tory seats, which makes you think they're just trying to shore up any form of victory as they can. And, Chris, that brings me neatly on to this poll that's just dropped, JL Partners poll for GB News. What's the detail?
Well, this is quite extraordinary. So we do have Conservative politicians presenting on the channel. You're a former Brexit Party MEP, so we are seen as being right of centre by people who like to criticise GB News and don't watch it. This poll by JL Partners gives the lie to that we have got a huge number, far more Labour supporters amongst our viewers than Tory ones. I'll read the numbers out. Labour, amongst GB News viewers, 530 surveyed by JL Partners between May 29th and May 31st, 46% want to vote Labour, now up 7%, 25% want to vote Tory, down 3%, and a 10-point jump in just a few weeks of support amongst our viewers for the Labour Party. Something is happening out there. These are people leaving, I think, the Tory party, the Red Wall, and going towards Labour.
And yet, Reform's vote on 18%, down to, perhaps surprisingly... But
not to me, though, because I think that came after the Farage announcement. I've always thought that Reform support as being like a balloon puffed up by the hope of Farage standing.
OK, Chris, so as you said, Martin, let me speculate. Chris, let's speculate that later on at 4 o'clock today, Mr Farage says he will stand. Where do you see that 18% going?
Well, that might go up. That might take more off the Tory party. If you have him standing, I mean, but what role will he be? Because there's also speculation he's taking part in a TV debate, Farage, on Friday, in this minor parties debate amongst the smaller parties. Wesley, Richard Tice, Ben Habib, Lee Anderson, they're all these people with, you know, they've all got their own who they think they are. It's my party, my role in this party. Farage starts elbowing his way in. What happens next?
But a lot of people, I mean, I certainly know, because I took part in 2 of those elections. The Brexit Boys then took a heck of a lot of votes from the Labour Party, particularly in the Red Wall. So it's not just, it wouldn't just necessarily impact.
That's the problem for Keir Starmer, because, as you rightly say, that that coalition built by Boris Johnson, started really by Nigel Farage in the Euro elections in 2019 with the Brexit Party. Those votes then went across the Tory Party, had been Labour. Can Starmer get them back? That's not clear at all. So it could hurt both, there's no question. But it does seem to hurt more the Tories than Labour. A resurgent Reform UK party.
So the big questions are this. Nigel said, I'm not standing, there's not enough time in 6 weeks. Well, there's only 4.5 weeks now. He stood 7 times before, 4 million votes with UKIP, didn't get a single sausage, not a single person away. And he didn't get voted in himself in 7 times. Have things changed this time, or is this the definition of insanity? Repeat the same thing and expect a different result.
I think he felt, I can't face doing it again. He doesn't like the rejection. If people tease him and say you've lost 7 times getting to Parliament, he hits back by saying, I won the 2014 Euro elections and 2019, and he's right to say that, but that was under a different voting system, not first past the post that we have. He doesn't like it. He's a proud man like we all are. He doesn't like rejection. I think now is a chance. He sees it, and I think also I should say he was in Ashfield, your old manor, on Saturday. He was mobbed when he's with Lee Anderson. He loves it. He loves people coming to see him. Yes, he's got this big opportunity in America with Donald Trump, but he wears his Union Jack on his socks. This is his country.
It is. Well, Chris, I know you need to get over there for that big announcement, so I'm going to let you pop off now, Chris. I'll speak to you in a short while. Let's move on now to Sir Keir Starmer, because he says that his commitment to Britain's nuclear deterrent is absolute. But he was put on the defensive earlier today after he was asked whether his whole shadow cabinet were behind him on the issue, because Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner and the Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy both voted against the renewal of Trident, if you recall, back in 2015. And here's what the Labour leader had to say.
I lead this party. I've changed this party. If we're privileged to come in to serve, I will be the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And I've made my commitment to this absolutely clear. And I've got my whole cabinet, shadow cabinet, behind me on this. We have changed the Labour Party. And I know full well that national security, defence of our country is the #1 issue. That is why I voted to renew the deterrent, and that's why I've been absolutely clear on this. I lead from the front. I've always led from the front, and this is an issue I feel very, very strongly about.
Well, to discuss this further, I'm now joined by our reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, welcome to the show. There's a feeling here that there's a rearguard action being fought against the previous positions of previous leaders, previous Labour incumbents who didn't seem that interested in defence. Now, Sir Keir Starmer on a full-blown charm offensive.
Well, Starmer says that this is a changed Labour Party, and that change, he says, is permanent. And key to that is what he's launching today, a so-called triple lock on Britain's nuclear deterrent. And that includes 3 policies that he has committed to should he be elected in July. First and foremost is that the continuous at-sea deterrent, Britain's nuclear submarine capacity, will continue. No. Secondly, he says the Labour Party will replace the current Vanguard-class submarines with the Dreadnought class. That's intended to come in the 2030s. Of course, it's worth noting that is already government policy. And finally, the third part of that so-called triple lock is that the Labour Party has committed to all of the necessary upgrades and improvements needed for those Dreadnought-class submarines. As I said, expected to enter service in 2030. And that third point, I think, is actually possibly the key section, because the Vanguard class, the subs that we already have, their intended lifespan when they were introduced in the 1990s was just 25 years. That's been extended significantly. They have looked, in many ways, rather worse for wear when returning to Faz Lane in recent years on those extended patrols, as many of them go through major life extension, maintenance work and repairs. Second to this big announcement also is the fact that he made it in front of several veteran Labour candidates and alongside the Shadow Defence Secretary, John Healey. And he was pressed, as you said, on those points about the former vote by many senior Labour bigwigs, including Angela Rayner and David Lammy. He's the Shadow Foreign Secretary, voting against those Dreadnought-class submarines in 2016. Well, Keir Starmer answered that by saying, if you elect me, I'll be the Prime Minister, not them. This decision lies with me. And his commitment, he says, is unshakable. He was also asked about Labour's defence spending plans, because as it stands, the government has a 2.5% spending increase on defence commitment by 2030. By contrast, Labour says they want to reach 2.5% when the conditions allow economically.
Superb stuff. Excellent analysis, as ever, Charlie Peters. Thank you for joining us. Now, don't forget that we'll bring you Nigel Farage's big announcement live at 4 p.m. today, live and direct, and an interview with him straight after that. And there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com. You've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country, so thank you very much. Now, it's officially, at last, finally summer, and we've got a brand new summer giveaway. There's £15,000 in cash to make summer spectacular. A brand new iPhone, AirPods and 500 quid to spend at the UK attraction of your choice. So if you like theme parks, visiting stately homes or fancy a spa day out, well, it could all be on us. And here's all the details that you need.
It's the Great British Summer Giveaway, and have we got a prize for you? There's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, there are just 3 days to go until the 80th anniversary of D-Day. I'm going to cross live to the nerve centre of D-Day operations, and we'll hear from a man who invaded Normandy with the Allies on June the 6th, 1944. Spectacular stuff. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
2,000 football banning orders have been issued to England fans ahead of this summer's Euro 2024 tournament in Germany. But authorities think that more than 300,000 England supporters could go to Germany, with Scotland fans, of course, also expected to travel in huge numbers. Well, I'm joined now by GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. So you went to a press briefing this morning. As I understand, the authorities are gearing up to tackle what they see as a huge wave of potential hooliganism at the tournament. What's the latest?
Well, they're certainly not saying they're expecting hooliganism, and they are preparing for the worst, of course, if it happens, but hoping for the best. They say that in recent tournaments, England fans and, of course, Scotland fans have been pretty well behaved, but there will be very significant numbers attending that tournament, which gets underway in just over 5 weeks' time. That first match is Scotland taking on Germany in Munich, and of course just 2 days later it's England against Serbia near Dortmund. So 300,000 England fans alone they're expecting, because it's so accessible. I spoke earlier to Chief Constable Mark Roberts, who is the national lead for football policing. This is what he told me.
Positive, you know, England fans got a great record at recent tournaments. We know when any number of that people will travel, there's always potential for issues, but I think the German authorities are really well prepared. And I think one of the positives, particularly thinking about our fans, Germany's a beer drinking culture, so the police are well aware of dealing with people in the nighttime economy. They deal with plenty of big festivals, so I think we're going to a place that is well suited to work with us to keep everyone safe and make sure there's no issues.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 3:25. Now, a reminder that at 4 o'clock, we'll hear live from Nigel Farage. He said that he'll make an emergency general election announcement. We'll bring that to you live and direct right here on GB News. Now, there are just 3 days to go until the 80th anniversary of D-Day. June the 6th, 1944, was one of the most important days in this country's entire history. Paved the way for the eventual liberation of Western Europe just under a year later. Well, our reporter Sophie Reaper is in glorious Normandy. Sophie, welcome to the show. The sun is shining on you. The scenes I've seen earlier, absolutely magnificent. Tell us about the build-up to this momentous day.
Well, good afternoon to you, Martin, or should I say bonjour from beautiful Bayeux here on the Normandy coastline. As you say, the preparations ahead of that D-Day anniversary are ramping up here. Flags are being hung. People from all over the world are descending on this part of France as the build-up continues. Just 2 of those people are from America. We spoke to them earlier on this morning, Ralph and Marianne. Marianne lost one of her family members on D-Day, and she wanted to come and celebrate and commemorate that family member. This is what they had to tell me.
We're here to celebrate basically the liberation of the world, how the course of the world may have gone one way, fortunately for the Allies and everybody else, France included. We have, it changed the course of the world, and now we can live in relative, freedom, and it's That's why it's so important to me.
It's about liberation of a people, of a oppressed, area, Europe, which was under siege by the Nazi Germany, and about that freedom isn't free. That in order to restore freedom, we have to pay a price sometimes. And sadly, it was my family, but it could have been anybody's family. And yeah, coming together is really important. And I think it's important for healing, and it's important in celebration of what we have as people on this planet, to be focused on more of what we have in common, and that's our humanity, than what our differences might be.
And that sentiment there from Marianne, that it could have been anyone's family, but it was hers. That was the sacrifice that those men made. They knew there was every chance they may not be coming home, and so many didn't. And that is why we'll be coming together all this week in the build-up to the anniversary, the 80th anniversary of D-Day.
Sophie Reaper, I'm very, very envious you're there this momentous time. Fantastic stuff. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. And I just wanted to add, I've been to Bayeux as a teenager, driving past the war memorials, the cemeteries there is such an incredibly humbling experience. They just go on and on and on. Every single one of those white crucifixes is a buried soldier, and they're just the ones they could find the remains of. I also went on a D-Day beach tour, Sainte-Mère-Église, where the Americans liberated many, many years later when I was there, still had an American mayor, a serviceman who stayed behind and married his local sweetheart in that village. An incredibly humbling experience. The original American flag that was raised to replace the German swastika is still on the church wall, full of bullet holes and charges. Just an incredible thing. And 80 years on, what a thing to remember. Now, before we go to the news, got some very quick emails on Nigel Farage. Of course, 4 o'clock, 30 minutes time, the big announcement. Jeff says this about standing Nigel in Parliament. It's a big yes from me. We need someone to change the face of politics in this country, and he is my man. Jonathan says, I wonder if Boris has signed up to the Reform Party. Now that would be a big announcement. Jonathan, let's do one thing at a time. Adrian adds this. I hope Nigel does stand. I wanted him to earlier before. We need lots more Reform candidates, though. There are hardly any at the moment. And Paul quickly adds this. When Nigel announces that he is standing, should the music comes, the music should be the final countdown, because it will mean complete Tory wipeout, or it should even be the theme tune to the movie The Terminator. After all, Nigel did say, I'll be back. A Hollywood ending there for this half hour. There's a brand new way to get in touch. Send your views, gbnews.com/your say. Loads to come between now and 4 o'clock. Of course, tributes are being paid to Rob Burrow, the rugby league legend who has died after a brave battle with motor neuron disease. But first, let's get your latest news headlines, and with Polly Middlehurst.
The top stories this hour. The Conservatives have been accused of phony culture wars after announcing plans to amend the Equality Act. The proposals would make clear sex means biological sex rather than gender, and would stipulate those who are biologically male but identify as female could be barred from using single-sex spaces. Labour called the policy an election distraction, but the Prime Minister says the safety and security of women and girls means the current confusion over the legal definition can't be allowed to continue.
So the Equalities Act was passed over a decade ago, and what's clear today is that there's a lack of clarity in the law, and that's risking the safety of women and girls. So we've announced the bold action that we would change the law, change the Equalities Act so that sex means biological sex. And what that will do will mean that providers of single-sex services and single-sex spaces will be able to protect women and girls and ensure their safety and security.
Sir Keir Starmer today said the Labour Party would never shy away from doing our duty at home and abroad, and national security and economic security, he said, must go hand in hand. He was reiterating Labour's commitment to maintaining the UK's nuclear capability. The Labour leader has pledged a deterrent triple lock, including the construction of 4 new nuclear submarines and an ambition to increase defence spending when economic conditions allow. He says a changed Labour Party has moved on from the Jeremy Corbyn era. Meanwhile, the Lib Dems have announced new protections for rivers and coastlines as part of their manifesto. It'll include a blue flag status for rivers, which would set legally binding targets to prevent sewage dumping. The party says water bosses have been able to get away with environmental vandalism by being permitted to pollute waterways under toothless, conservative policies. And as you've been hearing, friends and fans of Rob Burrow have been paying tribute to the unassuming lad with the superhero origin story following his death at the age of 41. Burrow's passing was confirmed by Leeds Rhinos yesterday following a lengthy and high-profile battle with motor neurone disease. He raised awareness and millions of pounds for the charity. Well-wishers have been gathering outside Headingley Stadium in Yorkshire to pay their respects, to lay flowers, scarves and tributes there. Those are the headlines. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Let's take a quick look then at the markets for you. And the pound today buying you $1.2783 and €1.1749. The price of gold is £1,829 and 16 pence an ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,289 points at the moment.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Polly. Now, remember that at 4 o'clock we'll hear live from Nigel Farage with that general election emergency announcement. That's all coming up live and direct. Ahead of that, if you want to get in touch with us here at GB News, there's a new way to do it. Here's Bev Turner with all of the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello again. I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to West Wales firstly in Aberystwyth, the Llanbadarn Road. The A44 currently closed just by St David's Road. There's ongoing emergency water main repairs. Luton in Bedfordshire, the A1081 shut between Gypsy Lane and the Kidney Wood roundabout. There's a police incident ongoing there, so that's causing queues. Hertfordshire next, the northbound A1M. Now just around Welwyn, that's junction 6 up towards Stevenage South at 7 northbound. A 2-mile queue. There's emergency road repairs, a lane shut and delays. And the A12 in Essex is currently part blocked between junction 20A, that's Hatfield Peveril South, and the Ballroom interchange in Chelmsford junction 19. This is in both directions there, and obstruction is causing delays, as I say, both sides of the carriageway at the moment. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
The Princess of Wales has said she's excited by a new report on prioritising early childhood, a cause, as we know, that she's closely associated with.
Yes, the task force findings claim that the UK could reap £45.5 billion in economic benefits if firms prioritise early childhood.
Well, let's talk about this now with our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Good morning, Cameron.
Good morning.
I suppose it's characteristically Catherine, isn't it, to say she doesn't want to distract from this report by sort of people talking about her health. But we should start probably by saying she said she's not feeling well enough to come and talk about this in public, but sort of saying she's watching it, keeping a close eye from behind closed doors.
Yeah, absolutely. This should not be seen as a return to work by the Princess of Wales, but I have been told she's A, read the report and B, been briefed on it. But this all stems really from her work when she started being a working member of the royal family, where she was working closely with people suffering from addiction, mental health problems. And what she found is all of these issues tend to stem from a poor start in life, so the first 5 years of a child's life. So in January 2023, she set up Shaping Us, this awareness campaign for the early years. 2 months later, she convened the business task force. So 8 members of big businesses across the UK, and over a generation, that could add, as they claim, more than £40 billion to the UK economy each year. We spoke to Peter Grigg yesterday. He's the chair of Home Starts UK, a charity which supports young families. Let's hear what he said about the Princess's role in this.
She's been a real driving force behind the report and everything it's done. And when we've spent time with the Royal Foundation, what it does, it reminds everyone that this is really important work and early childhood matters, that more businesses should get involved, that more charities are out there for people who want to do more to support families and children. So it's been a wonderful experience.
The People's Channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Well, GB News viewers can see live pictures now direct from central London, where Nigel Farage will speak around about 4 p.m. this afternoon. He said that he'll make an emergency general election announcement from that very podium you can see there. We'll bring that to you, of course, live right here on GB News. Moving on, the Britain's Got Talent final last night was won by 28-year-old Sydney Christmas from Kent, with a rendition of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. But the show's come under fire over whether it can really be called Britain's Got Talent, because 5 of the 9 finalists weren't even British. Well, I'm joined now by Professor Jonathan Shalit, who's a talent manager and is the chairman of the Inter-Talent Group. Welcome to the show, Jonathan. Should it matter that we had a Ghanaian dance double act, a South Korean dance troupe who are also performing karate? We had a tenor, a singer from South Africa, and even some Japanese stunt skippers. Should we be having a United Nations Got Talent meeting, or should it be Britain's Got Talent?
Well, I have a counter comment to that. Perhaps the English Premier League should be called the United Nations Premier League. In the English Premier League, you've got German, you've got French, you've got Dutch, you've got Ghana, you've got Mexico, you've got Brazil. Britain's Got Talent is the British viewers voting for their favourite talent, and that's what Britain's Got Talent is. In the same way as America's Got Talent had a Brit win a few years ago. I think if we were to start saying that no one but Brits become on Britain's Got Talent, we would be the biggest losers, because that would not allow British talent to go overseas. I think it's a combination of great talent. Absolutely, the producers want to have as much British talent as possible, but the television audiences want to watch a great show of a great selection of talent, and Britain's Got Talent gives just that. The ratings they achieve are still extraordinary. It was a massively talked about show last week. The winner, Sydney Christmas, is being talked about by literally millions and millions of people today. So this is a talent show that matters. It's a TV show that matters.
Is part of the problem, Jonathan, is that previous seasons have simply hoovered up all of the British talent. Anybody who would have stood by now has already been out there. We just don't have an entire plethora of talent that can just be cooked up within the space of 1 year. So they've had to widen their net to a global audience to fill the roster.
You're absolutely right, but the same applies to Chelsea, Manchester United and Liverpool. There are not enough English stars to be in their team, so they hoover up, as you put it, from overseas. It is an entertainment show. People enjoyed the talent last night. That wonderful Ghanaian family, I think it was an aunt and a niece, I can't remember. People found them adorable, and they enjoyed them being in their homes and watched them on television and voted accordingly. So I actually think that overseas competitors gives added pleasure and joy, and it's sort of part of, I think, the richness of Britain has always been that sort of cultural diversity we have, and on a show like Britain's Got Talent, that's shown in the strongest possible way.
But isn't the answer then to call it something different, rather than calling it Britain's Got Talent, because they're not from Britain, they are from elsewhere? Just call it, the World's Got Talent, and just make it more of a global event, because the badge that you see, Britain's Got Talent, it does imply that the people taking part are British, and 5/9 of them weren't.
Listen, I suppose that's, if you take that literally, anywhere in the world, you could rename many television shows and Premier Leagues to a different name, reflecting the word international. I think the issue is it's shown on Britain's premier commercial network, and British people watch it on a British TV station live every night. Hence, it's called Britain's Got Talent, in the same way as in America it's called America's Got Talent. But in America's Got Talent, have lots of overseas contestants as well, as they do on Asia's Got Talent, as they do on Australia's Got Talent. So I still think you could call it by a different name, but I think the name reflects the country in which it's broadcast. And do you know what? It works. People love it. So while people love it, it will continue.
And Jonathan, one more final point. They're even moaning about the winner, Sydney Christmas, not because she's British, but because she's already been in Starlight Express in Germany. She's appeared as cruise singer on Royal Caribbean International Cruises. She appeared as Rizzo in the musical Grease. She's got a song on Spotify. They're even complaining she's not a raw and new find. She's already an established artist. Is that a valid point?
Because the whole thing about Got Talent is it brings in people who've got experience of what they do, whether they be a singer, a juggler, a dancer, or something of any professional activity. What Sydney Christmas is trying to do is to be a West End star. And until last night, she wasn't that. After last night, she'll be a massive West End star. And Britain's Got Talent has given that incredible platform for her to be so, because in recent years, producers and directors and casting directors haven't given Sydney the shot her talent deserves, and this window of opportunity has given her that. So I think the show should be applauded for giving someone who hasn't been recognised properly for their talents in the past the platform they now need to be recognised. The fact is, any producer director who books Sydney for their show now will sell tickets because of Britain's Got Talent. And the Queen gets to enjoy, the King and Queen get to enjoy her at the Royal Variety Show this year. So that'd be tremendous for her.
Edu, Professor Jonathan Shannon, diplomatically put, you should get into politics. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure. Now, the world of rugby league is in mourning after the death of Rob Burrow, who fought a brave battle, of course, against motor neuron disease. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again. It's time for your latest GB News weather forecast, brought to you by the Met Office. Through the rest of today, it's actually likely to stay mostly dry, but there is some wet weather on the way as we go through tomorrow because of a system that's currently out in the Atlantic. This is going to push its way eastwards and then southeastwards across the country as we go through tomorrow. But for the time being, like I said, mostly dry. A few spots of rain perhaps across parts of northern England, Northern Ireland, where there is a decaying front lingering across us. But overnight, most places staying dry with some cloud, a few clear spells perhaps, but some rain then pushing into Northern Ireland as we head towards dawn. Because of the largely cloudy skies, I'm not expecting temperatures to drop a huge amount, generally staying in double figures. If we take a closer look at what we can expect tomorrow morning, then it is going to be a bit of a damper start across parts of Scotland. Some heavy bursts for the far north of Scotland, particularly Orkney, Shetland, could have some downpours here. Elsewhere across much of Scotland, quite a cloudy picture, and there will be outbreaks of rain coming in from the west, drier and brighter towards eastern parts. Also quite cloudy and damp across Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England and into Wales as well, but more central, southern and eastern parts of England actually starting the day on a dry note, and there should even be some sunshine breaking through the cloud at times. We are going to see that rain in the northwest gradually making its way southeastwards, and there could be some heavy downpours mixed in with it, possibly the odd rumble of thunder too. In the southeast, likely to stay pretty dry through much of the day. By the time the rain arrives here, it will have broken up, so it should be mostly light. Temperatures in the southeast rising to the low 20s, but colder air towards the northwest of this front means that it's going to be markedly fresher here, and there'll be plenty of showers pushing through. Some of these could be heavy, possibly thundery. There could even be a bit of snow over the Scottish mountains, which not unheard of for the start of June. Later on, as we go through the rest of this week, it's going to be a bit cloudier, a bit cooler than it has been recently, and most of us will see a bit of rain at times. Bye-bye.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, and GB News viewers can see live pictures on your screen from central London, where Nigel Farage will speak at 4 p.m, around about 12 minutes' time. Welcome back to the show. And as we said, we'll be live and direct from Nigel Farage at 4 p.m. for that emergency general election announcement. We'll bring that to you live, as well as an interview with Nigel straight afterwards. Now, the World Rugby League is in mourning following the death of Rob Burrow. Burrow was one of the most successful players of the modern era. He won 8 Super League titles with Leeds Rhinos, and he was diagnosed with motor neuron disease 4.5 years ago. Burrow died from the incurable illness, aged just 41. Well, our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley is at Headingley, which, of course, is Leeds' home ground. Welcome to the show, Anna. Tributes pouring out from everywhere, even beyond the world of sport. Tell us about the legend.
Yes, Martin, there really is here at the rugby ground. Hundreds of people have been coming since that news came out yesterday that Rob Burrow had died of motor neuron disease, surrounded by his family at Pinderfields Hospital. You may be able to see behind me, there's just a lot of tributes and the pile of flowers and shirts and scarves just keeps mounting for the rugby legend Rob Burrow. He had a 17-year career with Leeds Rhinos, and he represented England internationally as well, and on behalf of Great Britain. He was also known for his fundraising as well. When he was diagnosed with motor neuron disease at the age of 37 back in December 2019, he started fundraising along with his friend and former teammate Kevin Sinfield. They raised millions together for motor neuron disease, and in fact this morning his parents were at Seacroft Hospital, where a brand new £6.8 million Rob Burrow MND centre is being built. I spoke to Gary Hetherington earlier. He's the CEO of Leeds Rhinos, and this is what he said about Rob.
It's so sad. There was an inevitability about it. We all knew about that, but yeah, it's still a surprise. Rob was such a battler, and you know, the day has come, and it's such a sad one, and it's such a significant one as well, because I think what we should remember is the legacy that Rob leaves behind, both as a great player, as a great person, and of course his contribution to raising awareness for MND. Well, he was an inspirational player and character, and it was such a special one. I think special players are something that's the players that's a bit different, and he was certainly different. He played rugby league. He grew up in Castleford, and he grew up as a rugby league player from the age of about 7 or 8, and he was tiny, he was small, and everybody said, Robbie, you'll never make it because you'll never be big enough. And that was his inspiration, because he wasn't big. He was 5'4.5". He claimed to be 5'5", but he was so fast, so dynamically fast, and so strong and so tough, and that was his motivation, to prove everybody wrong, and he did exactly that. He proved everybody wrong because he was an inspirational player.
A really moving tribute there to Rob Burrow in his rugby career, and also in what he's done to raise vital funds and awareness of MND.
Thank you very much for that moving report there, Anna Riley. Now, in just a few minutes' time, we'll hear live from Nigel Farage. The Honorary President of Reform UK has said that he'll make an emergency general election announcement. And you can see live pictures there on your screen. We've got a load of your says coming in on this point. Lorraine says, how I wish Nigel Farage would stand for Torbay. He would definitely gain a seat around here. I just love the man and his politics. Taylor says this, I hope he goes for it. He has got nothing to lose and a massive following. We need Nigel to come back. Tim says, what about if he says he's going to appear on tonight's surprise edition of Love Island? That's all coming straight out of this. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. First, your weather with Alex Burkill.
A
a brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. It's time for your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. Through the rest of today, it's actually likely to stay mostly dry, but there is some wet weather on the way as we go through tomorrow. Because of a system that's currently out in the Atlantic, this is going to push its way eastwards and then southeastwards across the country as we go through tomorrow. But for the time being, like I said, mostly dry. A few spots of rain perhaps across parts of northern England, Northern Ireland, where there is a decaying front lingering across us. But overnight, most places staying dry with some cloud, a few clear spells perhaps, but some rain then pushing into Northern Ireland as we head towards dawn. Because of the largely cloudy skies, I'm not expecting temperatures to drop a huge amount, generally staying in double figures. If we take a closer look at what we can expect tomorrow morning, then it is going to be a bit of a damper start across parts of Scotland. Some heavy bursts for the far north of Scotland, particularly Orkney, Shetland, could have some downpours here. Elsewhere across much of Scotland, quite a cloudy picture, and there will be outbreaks of rain coming in from the west, drier and brighter towards eastern parts. Also quite cloudy and damp across Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England and into Wales as well, but more central, southern and eastern parts of England actually starting the day on a dry note, and there should even be some sunshine breaking through the cloud at times. We are going to see that rain in the northwest gradually making its way southeastwards, and there could be some heavy downpours mixed in with it, possibly the odd rumble of thunder too. In the southeast, likely to stay pretty dry through much of the day. By the time the rain arrives here, it will have broken up, so it should be mostly light. Temperatures in the southeast rising to the low 20s, but colder air towards the northwest of this front means that it's going to be markedly fresher here, and there'll be plenty of showers pushing through. Some of these could be heavy, possibly thundery. There could even be a bit of snow over the Scottish mountains, which not unheard of for the start of June. Later on, as we go through the rest of this week, it's going to be a bit cloudier, a bit cooler than it has been recently, and most of us will see a bit of rain at times. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, hello again, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Alness in the Highlands of Scotland. The A9 is currently blocked by Street Road and queuing. There's been a collision there. A couple of breakdowns on the northbound M6 causing queues. Firstly, now 2 lanes out of 4 are closed off at the Stafford services. That's between junction 14 and 15, so that's slow going. Also northbound just after Spaghetti Junction, that's junction 6 on the northbound M6. 2 or 3 lanes coned off. Queues back till Castle Bromwich at 5 for another breakdown. And there's a broken down car on the anti-clock M25. It's just before the Wisley interchange at junction 10, lane 4, the outside lane is coned off, it's slow going. And in Hertfordshire, the northbound A1M, just around Welling, junction 6 up to 7 is queuing for 2 miles, a lane shut for emergency road repairs there. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's the Great British Summer Giveaway, and have we got a prize for you? There's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's fast approaching 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. As you can see on your screen, Nigel Farage is about to make a hugely anticipated emergency general election announcement in London, with all the speculation rife that Nigel is set to announce that he will, after all, stand as an MP. We'll have full analysis and, of course, cover that announcement live, plus an interview with the man himself coming up. So let's get stuck into it. The only story in town, and it is that the Honorary President of Reform UK is about to make that massive announcement, the emergency general election announcement. The crowds are amassed, the journalists are there awaiting Nigel to come out. These pictures are live from central London, where he's about to appear shortly. Now, I'm now joined by GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, so you're down there, this massively anticipated press conference. What's the mood in the room?
Well, there's one of anticipation here, Martin. There's about 50 journalists behind you. If Steve pans round, you'll see the interest in Nigel Farage. He's only actually not even an MP. He's lost seven elections so far, but he thinks this could be his 8th if he stands for a seat. To the right, you'll see lots of TV cameras. It does seem quite interesting. People behind the scenes are saying this is an announcement which will knock our socks off. Well, we know what it won't be. It looks unlikely to be a deal with the Tory party to stand out any candidates, to make it, try and do a deal with the Tories, to try and make it harder for Labour to win their majority. But it looks more likely that we'll see him declare to fight the election. I'm watching the door because he's about to come through the door any moment now. We'll try and ask him as he walks in. I think what it feels like here is he's getting the band back together, and that means an 8th attempt at becoming an MP. I hear some voices now. The door is opening behind me. David Bull will be speaking first. He's introducing Nigel Farage. He's in the doorway there. That's David Bull. And behind him, you'll shortly see Nigel Farage. Yes, hello, how are you? Exciting? Yeah, lots of people who are, and here comes George, a key ally to Nigel Farage. There's Holly Valance, who's a pop star. Hello, Holly. Nick Candy, a donor to the Tory party. Here they all come now. These are the people who advise Nigel Farage. Through the door shortly might come the man himself. David Bull in the entrance there. He's a former member of the London Assembly. These are the people who have been talking to Farage over recent days. In my mind, he's been negotiating in public with the Tory party. They refused to do a deal with him since he made that offer to the Tories on the Sun's YouTube channel last week. We heard him say at the weekend he wants to hollow out the Tory party and take it over. The only way he does that is by being an MP, and it looks like that's where it might be going. But again, we're watching this door to see if he emerges. Here's David Bull. He'll be introducing him. Gawain Towler. Richard Tice, leader of Reform UK, looking very happy. Richard, is he standing? Richard Tice, is Nigel Farage standing to be an MP? We can't wait.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you very much
Go to David Bull now.
For coming this afternoon at very short notice. I'm Dr. David Bull. I'm Deputy Leader of Reform UK. I don't need to tell you this is an incredibly exciting time in British politics. Reform UK going up and up in the polls. And that's thanks in no small part to the gentleman I want to introduce to you now. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Lovely. Pleasure. Great to see you. Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to see you here in Glaziers Hall. And goodness me, 12 days in. Does it feel like a lifetime? Anyone bored yet? No. No, we've been trying to create some interest in this general election campaign. And here we are. Everyone thought that Reform UK, that we'd get squeezed out. That was the Prime Minister's and the Tories' strategy. They say, well, let's try and squeeze reform down. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? What's happening to the polls? Are we going down? Are we holding? No. We're going up. Yes, totally contrary to the Tories' plans. Actually, we're going up in the polls. And that's because we've been talking about what the country wants to talk about. But the main two parties, they're too embarrassed to talk about it because it doesn't suit their narrative or because they've completely messed it up. Yes, this is and must be the immigration election. That's why when the news came out about Facebook, without spending anything on Facebook advertising, we're getting the most likes, the most shares, because we're talking about what people want to talk about. And then campaigning, end of last week, in Boston and Skegness, in Ashfield, we're getting a fantastic response. It is truly extraordinary, but something is going on out there. Word is spreading like wildfire. People know there is something fundamentally wrong with what's going on in our country. And people are working out what it is. I've talked about it. Nigel's talked about it. The huge unplanned increase in the population is putting massive pressure on housing, on rents, on the affordability of accommodation, the pressure on healthcare. And it's suppressing wages for the lowest paid, the least well off, and the young. And it's simply unfair. And at least we're prepared to talk about it, because that's actually what the country wants to be talking about, and that's why we're going up in the polls. And people are looking for a bit of interest. I mean, there's not much interest in the main two parties, in the polling. They're basically not moving, or the Tories are slightly slipping. Now, I've obviously last week tried to install a bit of interest into this election. I've been talking about barbers. Others have been talking about hairdressers. It's getting people going. Why not? We need some interest. But actually, how do we go from interest to real excitement? How do we actually energise this election? How do we really say, let's turn on the rocket boosters? If we're in our highest pollings, 14, 15 type %, that's good. I'm delighted with that. But I'm hungry for more. I'm ambitious. I want to do ever, ever better. And that's why I thought we can do better than this. We can go from 5th gear through to 6th gear. This is a fossil-fueled car, by the way. To 7th gear. But what about 8th gear? What about turning on? How do we turn on the turbo boosters, the rocket chargers to this campaign? And as people know, I wanted Nigel to be able to give as much energy and effort and commitment to this campaign as he felt able to do. Now, Sunak thought he'd got one ahead of us, and everyone fell for it. I thought, no, let's get some real excitement into that campaign. So the big question is, does Nigel want to stand? I've got a different question. And I think this may drive and excite and enthuse ever more action, ever more boost to Reform UK. I thought, well, actually, what I'd really like is to invite Nigel to be leader of Reform UK. Absolute delight, he accepted. And so that's what the plan is, and that's why I'm delighted to welcome my very good friend, Nigel, to the stage to take us forward from here. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Great stuff. Very, very good. Richard, thank you very much indeed. Now, we put out the operations notice for today under the title Emergency Election Announcement. And we did that because we think this election needs a bit of gingering up. Thus far, it is the dullest, most boring election campaign we have ever seen in our lives. And it's funny because the more the two big party leaders try to be different, the more they actually sound the same. We've reached such ridiculous levels that we saw yesterday on the Conservatives' social media a post about the cross-channel illegal migration crisis with Starmer's got no plan, the Tories have reduced cross-channel migrants by 36%. So they've even come to lying, because it's now up nearly 30% this year. Sir Keir Starmer overnight, of course, on this big issue of immigration, says that they are going to cut the numbers. He, of course, the man who campaigned not just for a second referendum, but a believer in open borders, and a man who was a lawyer, fought very, very hard for those that arrive on the back of lorries to get benefits once they got here. So, frankly, we're in a situation, I think, where nobody believes a word that they say, no one's listening, people are zoned out, and right at the minute, none of the above is top of the polls by a country mile. And the problem with all this is we know whoever wins, taxes will remain high. The highest tax burden since 1948. Everyone's promising not to put taxes up, but nobody talks about reducing the tax burden. We also know that our people are getting poorer. Yes, we had growth in the economy. The last set of figures were slightly better than before. GDP, they call it. We must all bow down to the god of GDP. In fact, the more immigration we have, the better the GDP numbers are, because there are more people in the country. But what about GDP per person, per capita? It went down by almost 0.7% over the last year. So we know that taxes will stay high. We know that mass immigration will continue regardless of which party wins power. We know that people will get poorer, but we also know that crime or fear of crime will get worse. London, even the wealthier parts of London, have been transformed over the course of the last few years. Crime is so bad now that people generally don't even bother to report it. But it's okay, you can go shoplifting and nick up to 200 quid's worth of kit before anybody is even going to prosecute you. And these are all symptoms of a country that actually is in decline. We're in economic decline in relative terms. Oh, sure, we're doing better than our former partners in the European Union, but we're in other parts of the world. We're in social decline, and we're actually in a form of moral decline. We've forgotten who we are as a country. We heard a very impassioned speech by Keir Starmer this morning about D-Day, and he talked about his own brother serving on HMS Antelope in the Falklands. And he spoke actually with a great degree of passion. But here's a little statistic that sums up what's been wrong with our ruling classes. On Thursday of this week, there'll be massive international commemorations of D-Day, something in which the British played an extraordinary part, something which we can be just immensely proud of in terms of what we were able to organise, able to do, and the courage that people showed. But can you believe a poll out last week showed that 52% of 18 to 34-year-olds don't even know what D-Day is. And that's what you get when you're led by a career political class that don't really care about the country, that are embarrassed to say anything that could be seen to be vaguely patriotic. Oh, we're told that Michael Gove and others have improved the education system. Well, I tell you what, if over half of our young people in this country do not know about an event that is within living memory and which should be one of the proudest things this nation has ever managed to achieve, something I think is fundamentally wrong at every level. The centre of gravity on every national debate has moved hugely to the left since 2010, when David Cameron and George Osborne took power. So we represent a very different kind of politics. We believe that the Westminster political class are now more detached from ordinary folk than they were even before that referendum stunned everybody back all those years ago now in 2016. Something has gone very, very wrong. What we also know is the election is over. It's done. Labour have won the election. There is not a contest. There is a big MRP poll coming out on Sky News at 5 o'clock that will confirm all the things that we've seen before. Whether the Conservatives get 80 seats or 150 seats is now almost irrelevant. Starmer has won this election. And that's my fear. Nothing will change. Maybe things will get ever so slightly worse. Now, I stood here a week ago and I said, look, hands up. I've been nonplussed by Rishi calling a short-term election. Doesn't give me the time to fight a constituency. Doesn't give me the time to build up data. I thought the rational thing to do was not to stand, but to do my bit, as I put it, supporting the country around the party. And for the last week, that is what I've been doing. I've been travelling all around the country. I've had the honour of appearing with Piers Morgan on Question Time, amongst other things. I've been to Dover to talk about the migrant crisis that I alone predicted 4.5 years ago. But more importantly, I've been out on the streets, meeting an awful lot of people. And interestingly, a lot of young people. And I'll tell you this, and you won't have got this yet, and the pollsters won't yet have picked this up, but I promise you, after 30 years of experience in this game, something is happening out there. There is a rejection of the political class going on in this country in a way that has not been seen in modern times. But the other thing that really shook me in a way last week were the number of people coming up to me on the street saying, Nigel, why aren't you standing? And I gave my logical, rational reasons for it. But I couldn't help, after each exchange, I simply couldn't help feeling that somehow they felt I was letting them down, that I wasn't standing up for these people. People in their millions who've stood with me, in some cases, for many, many years. Election battles, referendums. And I guess I have been a champion for many of those people. I took the day off yesterday, had a normal day. Walked the dogs, did a bit of fishing, popped into the pub, you know, a normal sort of day, which gave me time to think and reflect. And I began to feel a terrible sense of guilt. Even if it is very difficult for me to find a parliamentary constituency, and it is hard. You know, contrary to what you'll hear on radio and television about how many times I've stood, most of the times I stood were for UKIP when we were a fringe party using elections as an effective pressure group to make our way through. And it is true. The one time I did stand and fight, the Conservative Party cheated against me in such a way that one of the party agents got a 9-month prison sentence, suspended. But of course the result stood. So all those things have been weighing on my mind. But difficult though it is, I can't let down those millions of people. I simply can't do it. It'd be wrong. So I have decided, I've changed my mind. It's allowed, you know. It's not always a sign of weakness. It could potentially be a sign of strength. So I am going to stand in this election. I'll be launching my candidacy at midday tomorrow in the Essex seaside town of Clacton. So midday tomorrow, Clacton, at the end of the pier. But perhaps more important than that, I've made a far bigger decision than that, which is, and I've talked to Richard, and he is happy about it. Oh, of course, you'll write your pieces about how badly we're all getting on, because that's journalism for you. Actually, I regret to say we're getting on quite well. But Richard is more than happy for me to put my head and shoulders firmly over the parapet and take the flak. So I'm coming back as leader of Reform UK, but not just for this election campaign. I'm coming back for the next 5 years. And there is one very simple reason for that. We all know already that the Conservative Party will be in opposition, but it won't be the opposition. They are incapable of it. They've spent most of the last 5 years fighting each other rather than standing up and fighting for the interests of this country. They are split down the middle on policy, and frankly right now, they don't stand for a damn thing. So our aim in this election is to get many, many millions of votes. And I'm talking far more votes than UKIP got back in 2015 when we got 4 million votes. We're going to get many, many, many more votes than that. How many seats in Parliament can we win under this system? Well, that's another matter. And that depends on what momentum we can get from here. When people start to realise in the red wall, with Reform second to Labour, when they start to realise that actually in those seats, it's a Conservative vote that's a vote for Labour. It's a Conservative vote that is a wasted vote. Then I think we might just surprise everybody. And I know that you all think that our votes will simply come from the Conservatives and they'll get crushed. Believe me, this Conservative Party under Rishi Sunak, who nobody ever voted for, not even the Conservatives voted for, this party needs no help in being crushed. It's crushed itself already. And those people who already say they'll vote Reform, very few of them would go back to the Conservatives even if we stood down. So we are appealing to Conservative voters. We are appealing to Labour voters. And those commentators and journalists that are longer in the tooth might remember that in 2015, against all predictions, we took more votes from the Labour Party than we took from the Conservative Party. So Keir Starmer, yes, he'll win, but we're absolutely going to make sure his percentage is a lot smaller than it is now. But perhaps above all, what we're appealing to are those who intend not to vote, because they don't believe there's anybody within the Westminster establishment that actually stands up for them. Very often they're people running small businesses, acting as sole traders. They run a taxi company, whatever it is. They know when they're right that nobody in Westminster is on their side. Nobody in Westminster even understands what they do. And what we're going to put forward over the next few years are men and women that will stand for us, represent us, who've got real life experience. To us, this is not just an extension of being in the Oxford Union. It isn't just some great big game. It's actually about our country and its people. And we're worried and we're fearful of many of the impacts that we've seen. We find what happened after those local elections just a few weeks ago, of candidates winning in Leeds, in Burnley, in Bradford and elsewhere, standing, shouting, Allahu Akbar, standing, shouting, we are coming to get you. The birth of sectarian politics in our country caused by massively irresponsible immigration policies. And it was the Labour Party that opened the door. And who would have believed that a Conservative Party would have accelerated it? To anyone that says to me, well, surely you won't stand against Bill Bloggs, because he's a really good bloke and he was a Brexiteer, the answer is 2.4 million. 2.4 million people this Conservative government have allowed to settle in the UK in the course of the last 2 years. So whether Bill Bloggs is a good bloke or not, he has actually been part of what is a massive betrayal of 17.4 million people who voted Brexit. They voted yes to get back our independence, but they absolutely voted to get back control of our borders. And Richard said earlier that this is the immigration election. Well, it is. We have to build a new house every 2 minutes just to accommodate those that are legally coming in to Britain. The impact on the health service, the impact on infrastructure, on everything else. We have to get a grip. It is the major issue of our times. The population explosion has devalued the life of ordinary Britons in just the most extraordinary way. And even if those in Westminster don't know it, I promise you that those outside of it do. Now, I want to pay tribute to Richard, who has kept this party going during times when he was told there was no need for it. No need for it. Boris has an 80-seat majority, they're going to deliver Brexit, and everything that Brexit voters wanted. Well, Richard has kept this going at great personal cost in terms of time and money. I'm very pleased to say Richard, from this moment, is going to be chairman of this party, and I hope is going to spend as much time in Boston and Skegness whilst I'm taking the flak, so he can go up there and win that constituency. And I think back, actually, in Boston, Richard, to 2015, when UKIP put up a 21-year-old candidate who was a bit green, to say the least. He got 15,000 votes. I'm sure you're going to get many, many more than that. So the really big message here is, what I'm really calling for, and what I intend to lead, is a political revolt. Yes, a revolt. A turning of our backs on the political status quo. It doesn't work. Nothing in this country works anymore. The health service doesn't work. The roads don't work. None of our public services are up to scratch. We are in decline. This will only be turned around with boldness. We will only recover our position through economic growth. That will only come when we get away from just half a dozen multinationals dominating the thought of our politicians and allowing real entrepreneurship to flourish. So we're very, very much on the side of the little guy and woman. We're very much on the side of creating growth. We're very much on the side of ending the poisoning of our education system, where 50% of young people don't even know what D-Day is. So make no mistake, we are unashamedly patriotic. We believe that it's right to put the interests of British people first. We believe Brexit needs to be implemented properly, and we are going to be the voice of opposition. And I tell you what, I've done it before, I'll do it again, I'll surprise everybody. Thank you. Okay. Right. Well, as is customary with everything Richard and I do, you can all ask as many questions as you want. Name and company. I do know, but name and company first.
Christopher Hope, GB News. Mr. Farage, you tried before. You haven't won several times. You admitted that. Why can you win this time without the data? You don't know where you live in Clacton, where are your supporters in Clacton. And the second question is, what's your ultimate goal? A 5-year plan to replace the Tory party as the main opposition party in this country if Labour win?
Point one, I made the point to you, Chris, earlier. I only stood once in earnest. All the previous times were as a pressure group to raise the profile of why we believe leaving the EU made sense when nobody else in Parliament was saying it. I did stand that one time. I did lose. I mean, I don't mind losing, but when they cheat, so much so that one of the party agents gets a 9-month prison sentence, you can perhaps understand why I'm not that friendly with the Tory party. All this, are you going to do a deal with the Tory party? I mean, not on your Nelly is the answer to that. Look, it's very difficult in the space of a few weeks, from scratch, for me, of all people, given what they're going to throw at me, to win a parliamentary constituency. But I repeat the point I made. You know, I can't turn my back on the People's Army. I can't turn my back on those millions of people who followed me, believed in me, despite the horrendous things that were being said about me in 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16. You know, they're still there. They're still there. And they want someone to believe in. But you can add to that a younger cohort. I said earlier, Richard said the same, something is going on. Isn't it amazing? We haven't spent a bean on Facebook pushes or advertising, and yet of the top 50 most liked posts on Facebook in the first week of the campaign, 32 are reform. Even the Today programme, what a shame Nick Robinson's not here, it really is. But even the Today programme, doing a feature on TikTok this morning, saying just how many young people are saying vote reform. We're not putting money into it. I mean, this is happening organically. Something remarkable is going on. The one prediction I'll make, Chris, is we will get many, many more votes than the 4 million that UKIP got in 2015. Many, many more votes. We will win seats. I don't know how many. The crucial part of this campaign will be getting those people who are saying now they'll vote Labour, but I suspect in many cases that's through disgust, to vote for something they really believe in. And the plan, look, we're a very new party. This election at short notice, we're not making any bones about it. It's damn difficult. But just because something's difficult doesn't stop you doing it. The real plan is to be the opposition party in the next parliament and the biggest party at the 2029 general election. That is the ambition. Simple as.
Very much. Andy Bell, 5 News. Nigel Farage, haven't you just made Keir Starmer the happiest guy in British politics right now because you've just ensured that a whole lot of Conservative seats that might have stayed Conservative will not be Conservative next time around?
Exactly the same question I was asked in 2015. Exactly the same question. Oh, you'll damage the Tories' hopes, and we took more than we took from the Conservatives. And you were all wrong. All of you were wrong in 2015. No is the answer. Those people currently saying they'll vote Reform won't vote Conservative. They've gone. The Red Wallers feel completely betrayed. The promises that Boris Johnson made, and frankly, I'm not sure now even believed in himself, they've gone. They're not coming back. What we'll do from here, be quite interesting actually, I think we'll draw fairly evenly from now on from Conservative and the Labour Party. You watch the polls. I said in a week's time, Andy asked me the same question. But I think you'll see we're going to start drawing from Labour equally as much as the Conservatives. I've got to reiterate this. The Conservative Party have lost this election without my intervention. It's done. Trust is broken. Trust is gone. And maybe that's why there's so little coverage of what's going on the election, because kind of people know the result. I've thrown myself into this today, not just to sort of entertain everybody, but because I genuinely think that something remarkable can happen. At least that's what I'll try for.
BBC News. Margaret Thatcher famously said she wasn't for turning. You are obviously for turning. Why the massive U-turn all of a sudden?
Have you never changed your mind about anything? Well, I tell you what, if you have never changed your mind about anything, you are a remarkable human being. I want to read your book. I'd love to follow it. No, I mean, look, this is the old thing about hearts and heads, isn't it? I rationally thought this was too difficult. I've changed my mind because I can't let down millions of people who would feel let down by me unless I was at the front and led this charge over the course of the next 5.5 years. That is why I've changed my mind. I can't let those people down. I won't let those people down. The amount of guilt I felt yesterday, simply thinking about it, was too much. But I also know, just as throughout Europe, there is a new phenomenon racing through politics ahead of these European elections this weekend. I promise you, something is happening out there. I've been in this game 30 years. I fought lots of elections. I've generally got a pretty good sense of timing. Something is happening out there. So yes, I changed my mind, and you know what? I'm not ashamed of it one little bit. We've got another one in the front row here.
Shihab Khan from ITV News. You mentioned that you're going to be contesting across the country. The system is designed in a way which it means it will be quite difficult for you to win a number of seats. What would be viewed as a success here now that you're running? How many MPs do you need to win to say this election has gone well?
I agree with you. Electoral reform is vital. It's absolutely ridiculous that we have no proportionality in our system whatsoever. Tony Blair looked at this way back in the 90s. AV Plus was the proposal where you'd vote for an MP, but have a second vote to get representation in Parliament for big views. All I can tell you is this. If we get a massive, massive vote and a relatively small number of seats, then the call for reform will be there. And I want to reform the electoral system. I want to reform the sheer corruption of the House of Lords, where, you give enough money, you get a seat in the House of Lords. We are a radical party. We don't think the current political structure works for our country anymore. Success on the one hand for me will be standing up and fighting for what I believe in, rather than running away from it, rather than, like answering the previous question. We're going to get a huge number of votes. I think there's every chance we'll get more votes than the Conservative Party. I genuinely do. And you can all hold me to that in a few weeks' time. But I genuinely believe we can get more votes in this election than the Conservative Party. They are on the verge of total collapse, and it couldn't happen, frankly, to nicer people. But I say that because in 2019, I got rid of Mrs. May. We formed the Brexit Party. Within 6 weeks, Richard and I got rid of Mrs. May. We then stood aside for Boris. I didn't even get a thank you. So I don't think they're terribly nice people, and I genuinely mean that. We will win seats in Parliament. How many? I don't know. All depends how much momentum we can build over the course of the next few weeks. Thank you very much indeed. One more in the end. I will get to all of you, I promise.
Claudia
I
Savage
promise.
from PA. The fact that you're making this announcement here and not in Clacton, does that stand as proof that you care more about the London media than you do about your future constituents?
Are you coming to Clacton at 12 o'clock tomorrow? Answer the question. Are you coming to Clacton at 12 o'clock tomorrow?
Is the bus going?
I tell you what, I'm going to be in Clacton at 12 o'clock tomorrow. Why do it here in London? Because this is where you all are. And you hate leaving your little bubble, don't you? No, I don't mean that. I will be. You're very welcome to come to Clacton tomorrow. There's a very good Wetherspoons there. Now, let's keep going. Lady there.
Hi, Natasha Clark from LBC. When did you decide to make this decision?
2 o'clock yesterday afternoon.
Whose decision was it? Yours or Richard Tice's?
Well, ultimately, it was my decision to say I'm going to put myself forward and say to Richard, are you happy with this? And he's more than happy with this. In fact, I think he's delighted with it, actually. So we've talked on and off about this, of course, for months. And I've been very reluctant to do this. Very reluctant. I mean, to be honest, I've been reluctant because I've actually rather enjoyed life at GBNews. And it's been a great job. Best job I've ever had. I did enjoy your mob as well when I was there, but then again, you know, I got sacked, but I'm used to that. It happens quite regularly. No, I've loved being at GBNews and doing a show 4 nights a week and doing extra stuff and travelling around the country and all of those things. So giving that up's not an easy thing.
Your plan to do this today, to come here today, to stand and to swap jobs with Richard Tice, that was your idea or his idea?
Oh, I don't really understand the
Was
question.
it a conversation that you guys had and you decided to do it together?
Do you think, I mean, do you think he's been bullied and strong-armed or something? I mean, what are you suggesting? No, it's a very silly question. Never mind. Let's go on.
Thank you. Kate McCann at Times Radio. Can I ask you if there was a particular moment? You mentioned meeting people and people saying they felt let down. Was there one interaction that really made this for you? And did you discuss it with Donald Trump? Did you seek his advice at all? And just finally, I believe you have a candidate already in Clacton, so what's going to happen to him? Thank you.
Well, yeah, you're right. There is a candidate in Clacton, and, you know, he knew for many, many months that this was a possibility. For many, many months, this was a possibility. Not a probability, but a possibility. Did I discuss it? I think the Donald's got other things to be dealing with just at this moment in time. He's been rather busy, including joining TikTok and suddenly racing up to ridiculous numbers. I think it was particularly in Skegness, actually. Particularly in Skegness, a constituency. In 2013, UKIP won 16 county councillors on Lincolnshire District Council. I mentioned earlier the seat that Richard's standing in, where we, you know, got 15,000 votes from a candidate who was incredibly young. So it's one of those places that I've campaigned a lot over the years. There was one particular interaction in the street with a bloke, and he sort of shrugged his shoulders and said, "Well, okay, mate, you know, I'm not going to give you a hard time or slag you off, but I just felt." And then the next morning I was in Ashfield with Lee Anderson and getting the same thing. And then I got home late Saturday night and had time to think about it. And then Sunday morning I just thought, I'm just not feeling good about this. I'm letting people down. Better to fight something that is very, very difficult, you know, where the outcome is far from certain. Better to do that than let people down. And I wanted the UK to be an independent country, to be a self-governing country. And, you know, I was pretty alone on that for many, many years, and we did achieve it. And I'm very proud of the fact that I spent all that time doing it. But I just think the way we're being governed, I think, is disconnected from ordinary folk. I just think we're failing. And I genuinely believe that the choice between these two men is very, very narrow. The narrowest it's ever been at any British general election, I think, in modern times. Sir.
Good afternoon, Nigel. Nick Ellaby Talk. Did Donald Trump's conviction help you change your mind? And how are you going to use Brexit to improve Britain's financial situation?
Okay. Donald Trump's conviction made no difference to me at all, and the whole thing was a complete kangaroo court from start to finish, utterly ludicrous. One looks at what Clinton and various other presidents have done. I mean, the fact that he even came to trial, I think it's a travesty. I've now no doubt he'll win the presidential election. But America becomes ever more divided, and the whole thing becomes ever more worrying. Look, you know, I've made my mind up. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, all right? I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I believe I'm right in doing it. And if I win, I win. If I don't, I don't. But many other Reform candidates are going to win.
How are you going to use Brexit to improve Britain's financial situation?
We are self-governing. I mean, the economics of this are the least of the problems. You know, we've gone from 7th to 4th in terms of global exporters. We're doing far better economically, as I mentioned earlier, than our former colleagues, partners in the European Union. There are many other things on the cost of living that we'll talk about in the next couple of weeks. In particular, why we're paying the most ridiculous energy bills and have been for the last 20 years, green subsidies, not being self-sufficient in energy, all of that will come. Lady there.
Thank you, Jerry Scott from The Times. Mr Farage, you spoke about kicking things up into the 8th gear. What are we going to see differently now to what has already come? And do you hope your return is going to bring in more donations? You made a point that he should put a lot of his own money in. How do you hope to kind of remedy that situation?
Yeah, the donation thing last week did start to turn, actually. Did start to turn. We started to get some serious money coming into the party last week. Again, it's all a bit last minute. 8th gear, which Richard talked about, I just think we're just going to do more of what we've been doing with an even higher level of energy, higher level of optimism. And you know what? The money is going to come. We will have enough money. We're not going to have 30 million. But as the Facebook example I gave earlier proves, actually, we're doing very, very well on a limited budget. It's amazing what a well-aimed stone from a sling can do. Lady there. I'm coming. Don't worry, I won't forget over here. No, I won't.
Sophie Huskisson from The Mirror. So you've announced you're standing for MP to become MP for Clacton.
Yes.
This is despite you previously having said, and I quote, "Do I want to spend every Friday for the next 5 years in Clacton?"
That's right.
What's changed your mind on Clacton?
That's right. You're absolutely right. It's a massive. You're absolutely right. It's a huge commitment. It is a huge commitment. I said earlier, in answer to the question there from LBC, I said earlier that actually working at GBNews is the best job I've ever had. I haven't had to travel up and down the country. I was 21 years an MEP. You know, I know what it's like to travel around constituencies, to meet people. It's a huge effort. And part of that weighing up factor was absolutely the question you asked. Am I prepared to give the time, not just to politics, but to a constituency as well? And the demands of a parliamentary constituency are greater, even though they're smaller, than the demands of an MEP constituency, necessarily. You know, surgeries, meeting people, all of those things. You are absolutely right. I'm making a massive potential commitment, if I win that seat, to this and to those people. Thank you for the question. Gentleman there.
Thanks. Ben Quinn from The Guardian. Mr Farage, is this the moment at which the actual candidate in Clacton is finding out that he is no longer the candidate? and also, what does it say about the way you view democracy, that these types of backroom changes of leadership can happen?
Sorry, I almost nodded off then. I really do apologise. He knew 6 months ago that it was a possibility, all right? He knew it was a possibility. And is my standing in Clacton going to help 600 other candidates? I think it may well do, all right? And sometimes tough things have to be done. You know, it's not an easy game. Right, we're going to go over here. We're getting a bit bored with the right wing. Let's go over here.
Mr Farage, Harry Fawcett from Channel 4 News. You say this has been in the works for some months. Until a couple of days ago, you were definitively ruling it out.
Yeah.
You're accusing the Tories of lying, of people not believing a word they have to say. Why should people, from this point, believe a word you have to say?
Hang on, I said I've been planning for months to do it. I've said already I'd planned to run. I was actually going to launch in this room last Thursday, all right? I didn't do it because of a short-term campaign that was called. I thought I could serve the cause better going around the country, as I've done for the last week, with a fair degree of energy, all right? I've just realised it doesn't work. The formula doesn't work. People don't buy it. They want me in the front lines. They want me to take the flak, and that's why I'm back doing it. So I haven't been dishonest with anybody. I have changed my mind, but I've not been dishonest with anybody, least of all myself.
Jane Merrick from the I newspaper. You said that you would get more than 4.5 million votes that you did in 2015. Will you resign if you don't get that target? And then secondly, are you still planning to help your friend Donald Trump with his Republican campaign?
If I don't get that result, I'll go down the pub and have a think about it, all right? And be very disappointed. No, look, I haven't changed my mind. Conviction or not, I haven't changed my mind that the world will be a safer place with Donald Trump in the White House. I think the weakness that we've seen under Joe Biden has encouraged, Putin, President Xi, etc. The world will be a safer place with Donald Trump. Clearly, if I'm elected the MP for Clacton, and I'm there every Friday, as the Mirror pointed out to me very helpfully, it'll become more difficult, but not impossible. All right? Okay. Yes. Sky at the back there.
Thanks very much. Richard Tice mentioned just now that the polls aren't moving. I guess that also reflects your performance so far. Is this decision in part a reflection of the fact that you don't think the campaign has got off to the start that you were hoping? And do you think that you're bigger than this party?
I would say this to you. The Conservative Party's first week, above all, has been to crush the Reform vote. We're bringing back national service and nonsense like that, which isn't actually true anyway. And it hasn't worked. We've gone up on the week, not down on the week. The point Richard made was we're 3 points up with most pollsters on last week than we were before. So actually, given the onslaught, we think we're in a pretty good shape. All right? We think we're in pretty good shape. What we now have to do is to get the big push up. None of you believe it's possible. Just you watch. I think what we've done today will inject some energy and some optimism into the campaign. We'll reprioritise what we're all doing. Hey, I'm pretty bullish about this. I really, really am. I'm pretty bullish about this. OK, let's keep going. A few more. I know time is running on.
Hi, Nigel. Christian from the Daily Express. You've spoken very passionately this afternoon about everything wrong with Britain and the current party system, but would you outline for our readers what Reform's optimistic, positive view of where Britain needs to go is? And can you confirm whether you'll be representing Reform at BBC's seven-way debate on Friday?
Do you know, Richard and I mentioned this in the car on the way here. There are a number of debates. We haven't had time to work it all out yet, all right? But we will, between us, we will cover all of it. I have to say, seven's an awful lot, isn't it? But hey, there we are. I'm sure Plaid are a very important party, and we should all see them in our houses in Gloucestershire or wherever it is. So I haven't worked all of that out, all right? We've got a lot more to work out over the course of the next couple of days. I did not come fully to this decision until 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon, having taken a previous tack the week before, and that's where we are. OK, I've got to do a few more. Yeah, one. Because people are getting bored.
Thank you very much, Nigel Farage. Jack Elson from The Sun.
Yep.
Many people will be surprised by this announcement because for the past week, you and Richard Tice have been saying that he's the leader and you're just helping out.
Yep.
So what is it? Can you just spell out that you have that you don't think he has? And secondly, if Donald Trump was British, do you think he'd be in Reform UK?
Well, he was in Reform USA, wasn't he? You know, when Ross Perot set up Reform USA, Trump was briefly a part of it. But of course, remember, it was Reform Canada that completely transformed the landscape in Canadian politics. And one of the reasons that I chose the name Reform, having been the Brexit party before, was I was thinking about that precedent in case the Tory party let us all down, which indeed they have. Look, you know, I've been doing this longer than Richard. I have, as I've said already 2 or 3 times today, there's a people's army out there that I built up over many, many years, and they're still there. And they're very fond of Richard, but they know me a little bit better. It's just as simple as that. Sir.
Thanks very much. Emilio from Politico, 2 questions. Firstly, I know you said that you're not interested, but have the Tories been trying to do some kind of deal with you at all? And if so, could you give us any details? And secondly, are you bidding to be Prime Minister in 2029?
There has been no attempt at seduction at all, at least not that I've noticed. So I don't think that's happened at all. I'm aiming for this political party to become the voice of opposition in the next parliament. I'm sure we're going to achieve that because the Conservatives are incapable of doing that. And in 2029, do you know what? By then, somebody younger and better may well have come along. But if I can help get it moving, help keep it moving, I'll be delighted with that. For me, politics has never been about rank, title and position. For me, politics has always been about changing things. about changing narratives, about changing outcomes. You know, well, yeah, look, if we get to that point in 29 and I'm still standing up, who knows? Chap at the back.
Hi Nigel, it's Joe Mays from Bloomberg. If Reform does well at this election and the final result is narrower than the polls suggest, and you found yourself in a position to influence the composition of the next government, would you help the Tories back into power, or would you rather Keir Starmer became Prime Minister?
Oh, goodness me. I mean, I haven't got time for all this. It's all too complicated. Look, let's just fight the campaign for the next 4 weeks, shall we? You know, I would, you know, if we were in a position to influence anything like that, as indeed the Lib Dems found themselves with Clegg back in 2010. Well, you know, I think our objectives would be pretty simple, wouldn't they? You know, no betrayal of Brexit and proper control of our borders, and whichever one offered the best would be the best. At the moment, I can't see either. Sir.
Hello, Tom Scotsman from Politics Home. Is this the moment now you're expecting, or would you accept more Conservative candidates to come into the fold for Reform UK and hopefully campaign for your party? And is that something that you've been thinking of?
I think in a week's time, the polls will look very different. As I say, you'll begin to see that a Conservative vote is a wasted vote in the red wall. I think much may change. Right, I've done my best. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the campaign trail.
Okay, that was Nigel Farage there. The phrase "a political bombshell" is often overused. I think we can agree. This was a political bombshell. For those just joining us, Nigel Farage, first of all, announced he was the new leader of Reform UK. Richard Tice to become the chairman. 5 years to be the... OK, I'm going straight back now to Chris Hope, who's with Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage, you're with Chris Hope and GBNews. Yeah. You really only chose to make this choice at 2 p.m. yesterday. The polls have been where they have been for months.
I'm admitting that happening on the streets that no one's yet detected, and I saw that over the course of the last few days campaigning around the country. There's a change going on, particularly among young people. Very, very interesting. And secondly, when you meet people face to face who've been supporting you for 10 years, 20 years, who feel let down by you because you're not, as they see it, you're not really there. I can't let those people down.
What are the odds on you winning? You're a betting man. Winning a seat.
We're going to win seats, don't you worry about that.
How many seats might you win?
You're the expert.
I'm not the expert, you're the only the game.
OK, that was Nigel Farage there talking to Chris Hope at that general election emergency announcement. You've just seen live on GB News, an expansive some 50 minutes. That talk, Richard Tice and Nigel Farage. For those just joining, let's just go over a few of the major points. And Richard Tice started by introducing Nigel Farage, who then said he would be the leader of the party. Richard Tice introduced him as the new leader of Reform, and then Nigel went on to say that would be for the next 5 years. He also then said he will be standing as a prospective parliamentary candidate in Clacton, and went on to outline some of the things that made him do that. He said he made that decision at 2 p.m. yesterday afternoon, and he said that was after meeting a variety of candidates, of voters on the campaign trail, particularly in Skegness and Ashfield, where people were shrugging their shoulders. He felt that he was letting them down. He felt guilty about that. He felt he had to stand up. A few of the choice comments that came out. He said, "I intend to lead a political revolt." That was the word he used. This is a turning point, a turning of our backs on the status quo. He said nothing works in Britain. He said, "I've done it before, I'll do it again, I'll surprise everybody." He said, "I genuinely believe that we can get more votes than the Conservatives," even very bullish in that prediction. And he said something remarkable is going on. He kept talking as well, and again echoed that to Chris Hope, our political editor, that young people in particular were telling him something is going on out there. Well, I'm joined now by Maria Caulfield, who's a health minister for the Conservative Party. Maria, welcome to the show. So no doubt you just saw Nigel Farage there speaking out. One of the more boorish predictions he made is that the Reform Party, he said, will get more votes than the Conservative Party at this general election. He said nothing works in the country, and he squarely and thoroughly laid the blame at the feet of the Conservative Party. What's your immediate reaction to that?
Well, he also admitted that our economy is doing really well post-Brexit, and actually we're outperforming the EU and many other countries, and then seemed to dismiss that almost as quickly. And I think, you know, the interesting part is we had local elections just a few weeks ago, and Reform won just 2 council seats in the whole country. And I think it's just very disappointing for those of us who fought really hard for Brexit. I was a Brexit MP in a Remain constituency and took a lot of flack for doing so. But we have proved that the doubters wrong, that this economy is growing faster than many others across Europe, that we've got record levels of employment. If you look at our education system, our school reading skills are, I think we're one of the highest in the Western world for reading age. There is a lot of things that are working. Manufacturing is up in this country, and you know that's despite 2 years of COVID. And it was this country who led the way, by the way, just to get us through COVID. And Boris reduced restrictions when people criticised him for doing so. So, you know, it's very easy for Nigel to talk about this. But I think their performance in the local elections wasn't great. And I think the latest polling, even today, shows that Reform probably won't win any seats. And all it does is let Keir Starmer in.
But Maria, that may change now that Nigel has entered the arena of battle. And when he was asked that specific question about why is he standing against good Brexiteer Conservatives, perhaps you put yourself amongst them, he said there are 2.4 million reasons, and that is the amount of people who've been allowed into the country in the last few years alone. And he laid that blame squarely at the door of the Conservative Party, who is the government in power. He said this is the immigration election, and specifically on that and high taxes and on crime and worse, then the Conservative Party is to blame. He said we're a nation in moral decline. And, you know, the Conservative Party, you're the ones who've been in power.
Well, you know, I don't necessarily agree with that because, you know, we are the party, the only party who's been putting our neck on the block trying to get immigration down. We have seen, even in the last few weeks, there have been no boat crossings during the latter part of May. We have got 25,000 people deported in the last 12 months. The media never report these figures. We have stopped 36,000 crossings in the last 12 months from France. We've got the Irish Taoiseach, for example, complaining about our Rwanda policy because illegal migrants are flocking to Ireland to avoid the UK because they're so worried about Rwanda. We have made some concrete changes that Keir Starmer will overnight turn around and scrap. And what I didn't hear from Nigel, and I've got a lot of respect for Nigel, and you know he is, you know, he's been a tremendous campaigner, particularly around Brexit. But I didn't hear any policies on what Reform would do about immigration at all.
Can I ask you a quick question to sum up? Will you admit now that if Nigel Farage now is back, then it's going to severely impact the Conservative vote?
Well, I'm not sure that it will, because I think as many Labour supporters supported Brexit as Conservatives. We saw that in the Red Wall seats. That's why traditional Labour seats went to Conservative, because we were the party that got Brexit done, and they turned to Boris and the Conservatives in 2019. So I think it affects Labour as much as it affects the Conservatives. But overall, when you look at the polls and when you look at the local election results, it doesn't materialise into seats. And we know that from our system, that sometimes you can have, and it's happened to the Conservative Party in the past, a significant majority of the votes that doesn't always translate into seats.
Okay.
And so all it will do is split the Brexit vote and let Keir Starmer into number 10.
OK, Maria Caulfield, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us, giving us your immediate reaction to Nigel Farage's announcement. And now, as you've just heard, Nigel Farage will stand as Reform UK's candidate in Clacton. And here is a full list of those who have declared their candidacy so far in that constituency. Jovan Uwasu Nipol, Labour Party, Natasha Osborne, Green Party, Giles Watling, Conservative Party, Matthew Bensalem, the Liberal Democrats, and Nigel Farage, Reform UK. And that list of candidates isn't finalised yet, as the deadline isn't until later this week, and that will be published on GB News website, gbnews.com, once it is finalised. Now, people have been reacting immediately in a visceral manner, and they said this: Helen, thank goodness, what a relief Nigel is standing. Isabel adds this: well done, Nigel. I hope you get the seats you need for the next election. Jane says this: clever Nigel, he's waited until very near to the deadline before putting his cards on the table. That means that his opponents won't have the time to put up their kitchen sink and their best opponents against him. Nigel, we did feel let down by you, Catherine says, but now we forgive you. Things can only get better. Well, that's an astonishing hour we've packed in there. We'll have full analysis after this, the best political analysis. What does this mean for the future of this general election campaign? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, hello to you again. I'm Jules Buckley. Let's start with a breakdown on the westbound M62 in West Yorkshire, causing queues. 2 lanes are shut, that's Chain Bar Junction 26 through towards Brighouse at Junction 25. A couple of breakdowns on the northbound M6. Firstly, in Staffordshire, 2 lanes are shut at the Stafford services. There's a broken down lorry there. Of course, that's between Junction 14 and 15. That's slow going. The earlier breakdown just after Spaghetti Junction, Junction 6 northbound is cleared, but still seen patchy queues back to the M42 interchange at Junction 4A northbound, and the northbound M1 at Redbourne up to the Luton Airport Spur Road, Junction 9 to 10. Better news there as well. The earlier breakdown has cleared. All the lanes are open. Looking at the cameras, though, still patchy congestion on the approaches. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We've got summer sewn up with an incredible trio of treats, and you could win them. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. Fun in the sun could be on us. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you, and what an afternoon it's been. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the halls of Westminster all across the UK. It's our top story and it's official. A political bombshell from Nigel Farage, who has recently this afternoon announced that he will be standing in the seat of Clacton in the general election, whilst he has also announced as the new leader of Reform UK. And just how bad could this be for the Prime Minister, who is already falling behind in the polls? He's trailing by 21 points with GB News viewers in our latest poll. Those 2 big stories plus full reaction all coming up in our next hour. Well, that's put the cat amongst the pigeons, hasn't it? Nigel Farage said it was the dullest general election campaign in history, and today he's just rolled a grenade into the arena, and what an announcement it was. We'll have full analysis. First of all, he announced as the new leader of Reform UK. Richard Tice has stood aside. He's now the party chairman. Then Nigel announced he is going to stand in Clacton. He changed his mind, he said, at 2 p.m. yesterday after having met with a bunch of voters in Skegness and in Ashfield while on the campaign trail. He simply said he felt too guilty to turn his back on people who've put their faith in him. He said he could no longer stand aside. He had to enter the arena of battle no matter how hard it may be, and he acknowledged it will be hard. It's pointed out to him by Chris Hope from GB News and other journalists. This could be the 8th time he hasn't succeeded in getting elected. But Nigel said he'd rather stand and fight than stand aside. An amazing afternoon in politics. If you believe in politics, well, Christmas just came early. Stick with us. We'll have full reaction throughout the next hour. Get in touch with your views, gbnews.com/your say. Was this the right thing to do? Will it make no difference? Get stuck in. I'll read out as many as I can in what promises to be an action-packed hour. But before all of that, it's time for your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, let's recap that breaking news that come to the political establishment and indeed the country in the last half hour. Nigel Farage has said he will stand as the Reform UK parliamentary candidate for Clacton in Essex, the general election in July. He was speaking at a news conference in London just a short time ago to confirm his change of heart. Mr Farage also announcing he's going to be taking over as leader of the Reform UK party.
So I am going to stand in this election. I'll be launching my candidacy at midday tomorrow in the Essex seaside town of Clacton. So midday tomorrow, Clacton, at the end of the pier.
Well, Rishi Sunak has denied he's stoking a culture war with his pledge to amend the Equality Act. The Prime Minister wants to make clear sex means biological sex rather than gender, and says the current confusion over the legal definition can't be allowed to continue. The proposals would allow organisations to bar men who identify as women from single-sex spaces, including hospital wards and sports events. Labour called the policy an election distraction. The Liberal Democrats say there's no need to unpick the Equality Act itself. Rishi Sunak says, though, the Conservatives are trying to clarify the law rather than change it.
So the Equalities Act was passed over a decade ago, and what's clear today is that there's a lack of clarity in the law, and that's risking the safety of women and girls. So we've announced the bold action that we would change the law, change the Equalities Act so that sex means biological sex. And what that will do will mean that providers of single-sex services and single-sex spaces will be able to protect women and girls and ensure their safety and security.
Rishi Sunak. Well, Sir Keir Starmer says Labour is totally committed to the security of the nation and to the UK's nuclear deterrent. He described the Trident programme as a fundamental, vital part of our defence. Labour is pledging to build 4 new nuclear submarines and increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP when economic conditions, he says, are right. The Conservatives say they'll meet that target by 2030. Sir Keir, though, dismissed concerns that his shadow Foreign Secretary and the Deputy Party leader voted against the UK having nuclear weapons just 8 years ago. And he's criticised the Tories instead for politicising the issue.
Prefer if politics were kept out of this issue, even at this election. Throughout the whole of this Parliament, I have deliberately not been partisan over security. Yet just before this election, the Tories questioned this Labour Party's commitment to national security. And I will not let that stand. The people of Britain need to know that their leaders will keep them safe, and we will.
Sir Keir Starmer. Now, the Liberal Democrats are vowing to tackle water pollution as part of their election manifesto. They've announced plans for a new protected blue flag status for rivers, with legally binding targets to prevent sewage dumping and special protection for swimmers and wildlife. It would include the expansion of marine protected areas to cover at least 50% of the UK's territorial waters by 2030. Lib Dem Deputy Leader Daisy Cooper told GB News the move will benefit everyone.
And we've been leading the campaign to end the scandal of raw sewage dumping. Here in Henley, local residents know all about that. They know that the sewage dumping is bad for wildlife. They know that it's causing real problems with tourism as well. And people want to see an end to this particular scandal. That's why today Liberal Democrats are announcing our plans to introduce a blue flag status to protect local rivers.
Daisy Cooper. Now, friends and fans of the former rugby legend Rob Burrows have paid tribute to the unassuming lad with a superhero story following his death at the age of 41. Burrows' passing was confirmed by Leeds Rhinos on Sunday following a lengthy and high-profile battle with motor neurone disease. He's raised awareness and millions of pounds for that charity. Well-wishers gathered outside Headingley Stadium in Yorkshire today to pay their respects, laying flowers, scarves and other tributes there for him. Smoking charities are urging the next government to revive legislation designed to ban young people from ever being able to legally smoke. New analysis has revealed that the majority of Britons are backing the plans to phase out the sale of tobacco completely. The law would have made it illegal to sell tobacco products to anyone born after January the 1st, 2009. The Prime Minister said he was disappointed that the law wouldn't make it into the statute books before the general election. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now, I've heard in this past hour from Nigel Farage that he will take over from Richard Tice as leader of Reform UK and that he will stand as a candidate for MP in Clacton in the upcoming general election. Here's a reminder of the moment he made that announcement.
But difficult though it is, I can't let down those millions of people. I simply can't do it. It'd be wrong. So I have decided, I've changed my mind. It's allowed, you know. It's not always a sign of weakness. It could potentially be a sign of strength. So I am going to stand in this election. I'll be launching my candidacy at midday tomorrow in the Essex seaside town of Clacton. So midday tomorrow, Clacton, at the end of the pier.
Well, I'm joined now by GB News' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson. Nigel, thank you for waiting patiently. I know you've been waiting to get your opinion across all this time. Well, that put the cat amongst the pigeons, didn't it?
It certainly did. The great thing about general elections is the unexpected keeps happening. So however well planned the various parties do their campaigns, they're always knocked off track by something coming completely out of the blue. And Nigel has certainly come completely out of the blue this afternoon.
Now, he was very boorish as well as the factual announcements. He's now the new leader. Richard Tice is the party chairman and he will stand as a candidate. He said, I intend to lead a political revolt. He's talked a lot, Nigel, about this being a turning of our backs on the status quo. He specifically mentioned a lot of young people he's meeting on the campaign trail. He said nothing works in Britain. And he made a very bullish prediction that he genuinely believes that the Reform Party can get more votes than the Conservatives at this general election. Nevertheless, though, Nigel, he's tried 7 times before and he hasn't done it. Do you think it could be different this time?
I'm afraid I don't. I mean, when you look at that kind of typical Nigel boast, initially in his statement he was saying, "Oh well, I'll improve UKIP's 4 million votes from 2015." Then he went on to say he'll get more than the Conservatives. Well, that means more than 20 million votes, which is highly unlikely with what's left of the campaign for a very new insurgent party. Now, if you look at the various various polls. We've seen the GBNews poll today with a 21-point lead for Labour. That puts Reform on 18. A YouGov poll has dropped within the last couple of minutes. That gives Reform 15 points. But even that doesn't deliver any MPs. Our first-past-the-post system always conspires against small parties. And even though Reform are doing better than, say, the Lib Dems are still predicted to get between 40 and 50 MPs.
But the point with that, though, Nigel, is that those polls were conducted before this announcement. Do you think this announcement will change the playing field? When we look specifically at the constituency of Clacton, a poll was carried out by Survation in January. Without Farage, it'd be a Conservative hold by 8 points, but with Farage on the battlefield, he would take that seat by 10 points. So the polls do suggest that there would be a significant change were Nigel Farage not only to stand as an individual, but as the party leader. Do you think that will have an impact, or do you think it will? The only impact it will have, as people are saying at that press conference, it will hand Sir Keir Starmer the keys to number 10?
Certainly, Labour benefit mostly out of this. It's Tory voters who are most likely to go to Reform. When it comes to Clacton, yes, Nigel's got a good chance to win Clacton, although he has to overturn a 25,000 Tory majority there to do it. I thought he would take South Thanet when he was standing there for UKIP back in 2015. I spent some time with him on the campaign trail down there. He didn't. He came second there. It was one of his big disappointments, but it just shows that it's very difficult to turn even someone with the personality and charisma of Nigel Farage into voting. So what this might do, though, is increase the Reform polling share. So if they start going above 20%, that's when they start picking up MPs. Not very many, but it's when you start to actually make a real difference.
OK, thanks, Journalist Nigel Nelson. Thanks for being patient and waiting all that time to get stuck in. And also, let's cross now to GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, you were live and direct there, and you grabbed Nigel Farage, did his first interview as he left the podium. So, Chris, I want to get to you in a moment. I want to know from Chris Hope what the Conservative Party reaction has been to this. I spoke to Maria Coalfield a short while ago. Chris Hope, I think we can join you live now. So, Chris, I wanted to know to you what has been the Conservative Party reaction. Nigel Farage very, very strongly there, saying, I genuinely believe we can get more votes than the Conservatives. What's the reaction?
Yeah, they're saying that the Tory party put out a statement to GB News saying that Nigel Farage risks handing Keir Starmer a blank cheque to rejoin the European Union, the Tories say, impose the retirement tax on pensioners and hike taxes on hard-working Brits up and down the country. This statement goes on. It's hard-hitting, Martin. Farage knows that Reform won't win any seats, but he doesn't seem to care that a vote for Reform only helps Labour. He's doing exactly what Keir Starmer wants him to do. Just yesterday, EU insiders openly voiced their expectation that Starmer would seek a softer Brexit deal, opening the door to rejoin the EU altogether. That would mean uncontrolled immigration and betraying the will of the British people. If Farage is he really willing to risk undoing his life's work by handing Starmer a blank cheque to rejoin the EU? And just finally, the statement says only a vote for Rishi Sunak and the Tories can deliver a clear plan, bold action and a secure future for the party. So clearly, the Tory attack line here is don't back the guy behind me, Nigel Farage, don't back Reform, you just help Labour get an even bigger majority. But Nigel Farage mentioned earlier, when I asked him a question for GB News, he remembers back to 2015 when the party won 4 million votes, and many of those came from the Labour Party, and that's his point. He says he thinks that Reform can damage both Tories and the Labour. It's not really an attack on the Tory party, but the party with most to lose from it is no question the Tory party.
But Chris, when pressed on this matter of why stand against Conservatives who are Brexity, who are decent, Nigel said there are 2.4 million reasons. And that's the number of people the Conservatives have let into our country since that promise to take back control. And as for the threat of Sir Keir Starmer rejoining the European Union, Nigel would no doubt say Well, that's because the Conservatives didn't really get Brexit done. They left the cat flap to Brussels open.
And that's why he'll do no deals here with the Tory party. He's not going to say to them, we'll stand down any individuals because you backed Brexit back in 2016. He sees a betrayal amongst the main parties, frankly, who run this country, the failure to control the borders on net migration, legal migration, and of course illegal migration, which is only a fraction of that. He sees that as a failure of the vote that he campaigned for back in 2016. And that's why he's challenging the two main parties. He's calling it the immigration election. He's saying the election is over. Labour's won the election. There was no contest left, Nigel Farage just told us just now. We'll hear more from him tomorrow at midday in Clacton. But I think the whole election campaign, Martin, has got a lot more interesting.
Certainly has. He said he wanted to ginger things up, and by Jove, that's what I call a pinch of ginger. Thanks for joining us, our Chief Political, Chris Hope. Thank you very much. And we can now cross to speak to the Chief Political Editor of the Financial Times, Jim Pickard. Jim, well, the election campaign, Nigel said, was the most boring in history. It certainly has got considerably spicier in these past 2 hours. We've already just heard there the Conservative Party blasting back that Nigel Farage will be handing the keys to Downing Street to Sir Keir Starmer, leaving the door open to rejoin the European Union. Really, really hitting Farage where it hurts.
I would say that's kind of scaremongering, and that's what I'm sure Nigel Farage will say. It's scaremongering. I'm sure Labour Party will say that as well, because Keir Starmer has been consistent, at least for the last couple of years, that Labour government under him would not try and take Britain back into the European Union, wouldn't take Britain to the single market or the customs union. Yes, they are seeking to soften some of the edges of the existing deal to make life easier for business, changing a few things on phytosanitary checks and maybe a little bit more cooperation on defence and that kind of thing. But they are, as far as we can believe, Keir Starmer, and of course he is someone who has changed his mind a few times over certain issues. And of course, if you go back 7 years or however long it was, he was advocating a second vote on Brexit. So I'm not saying that one should necessarily trust him, but I think from having talked to a lot of senior Labour MPs, they do feel like the question of Brexit is now settled, not really something where they want to rip the plaster anymore. So the Conservative Party right now, the fact they put out that statement right away shows how unnerving this is for them to be attacked by the Reform Party from the right. And if you think about where the Conservative Party has taken that campaign over the last week or two, they've been trying to squash the Reform vote. They've been appealing to older Brexit voting people with policies such as bringing back national service, having this pension triple lock, talking a lot about this policy of sending asylum seekers to Rwanda. And therefore, and we've seen Nigel Farage is coming back now, that is going to make it a lot harder for the Conservative Party to get those messages across and suppress the Reform vote. In fact, the opposite might happen, which is that the Reform vote might even go higher. And if YouGov's got them on 15% right now, they are kind of in spitting distance of the Tories. I don't believe in my gut that they can overtake them. But when Nigel Farage makes that boast, weirder things have happened in politics. I still think the central assumption is just that they will damage the Tory vote and help Starmer to a big majority. But weirder things have happened.
And the point here, Jim Pickard, he said, no deals with the Conservatives, absolutely no way. He said, I intend to lead a political revolt, a turning of our backs on the status quo. He said this came to him on the campaign trail, particularly in those very Brexity, disillusioned parts of Britain, Boston and Skegness, Ashfield. Nothing works in Britain anymore, he said. And he said, I've done it before, I'll do it again. I'll surprise everybody. Or what might we see, Jim, the fact 7 times he's tried, 7 times he's failed to get elected. Is something different this time, Jim Pickard?
Well, in the first past the post system, the two parties always prosper. We see that time and time again. And it's very rare for one of the tiny parties to get an MP. You look at Caroline Lucas in Brighton, that was kind of an aberration. I think the Green Party is optimistic of getting a seat in Bristol this time around. But again, it's an aberration because of the way the system just squeezes the small parties. And it's not impossible that these figures, these polls giving Reform 15% or so in the polls, could be exaggerating the Reform vote, because when people get into the polling booth, they might realise that generally speaking, it's either a Labour or Conservative government, and therefore they will retreat to the more, inverted commas, mainstream party. But what I would say Nigel Farage is onto something is that when you talk to voters in recent months, the level of disillusionment with Westminster and with the main parties is at very high levels. I was in Grimsby a few months ago, and I was really surprised. You meet a lot of people who aren't that interested in politics when you go out and talk to voters, but it just felt stronger and heavier, that mood of dissatisfaction, than I've seen it in 17 years in political journalism. And so, weirder things have happened than Nigel Farage getting a seat. I really wouldn't bet against him becoming the MP for Clacton. And we saw it again with George Galloway at a by-election quite recently. I wouldn't bet against Farage right now.
And the thing is, Jim Picker, we live in such volatile and unpredictable times. That poll just out by Sky News has Labour on 422 plus 222. That is doubling their vote. Conservatives 140, losing 232. That's halving their vote, and an SNP wipeout from 17 down to 17, losing 31. Perhaps things are different this time, Jim Piggott, but we have to leave it there. That's the political editor of the FT, Jim Piggott. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much. And as we just discussed, Nigel Farage will now stand as Reform UK's candidate in Clacton. And here is a full list of the people who have declared their candidacy in the constituency so far. And we have Jovan Uwasu-Nepal, that's the Labour Party, Natasha Osborne, Green Party, Giles Watling, the Conservative Party, Matthew Bensalem, that's the Liberal Democrats, and Nigel Farage, Reform UK. And that list of candidates, just to be clear, isn't finalised yet, as the deadline isn't until later this week. And when it's published, it of course will be on the GB News website once it's finalised. Now, don't go anywhere. Lots more reaction to that massive news that Nigel Farage is to stand in the seat of Clacton in the forthcoming general election. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Apparently alcohol abuse is costing England £27 billion a year. I mean, in fairness, that's the price of 2 rounds in London, Nicholas.
Yeah, tell me about it. Not that I'm a big consumer of alcohol. I'm very Mediterranean in my consumption. But revealed, alcohol abuse costs soar to £27 billion a year. So this cost basically encompasses a variety of aspects, from health-related problems, so the cost on the NHS, lack of productivity, people who lose their jobs, social services, and all that. And of course, it has been on the rise, 37% more compared to last time this was studied in 2003. So now Institute of Alcohol Studies and some other groups are pushing or asking for tougher taxes and tougher regulation. But is that the solution? Like in ancient Rome, they said, in medium stat virtus, like moderation, virtue is in moderation. And again, if they're going to raise the price, people like myself or yourself who are moderate consumers, pardon?
You're going to turn to heroin. Because it'll become... I mean, well, this is what's happened in Scotland.
It becomes unaffordable, so...
Yeah, in Scotland, they had minimum unit alcohol pricing, and so it pushes up the cost of getting off your tree for your average Scottish ne'er-do-well who likes to sit on a bus stop and drink a bottle of cider. So instead, they're turning to street drugs, which are cheaper by comparison.
That is just terrible. I like that the alcohol industry have come back on this. A guy called Matt Lambert, who's the chief executive of the Portman Group, and they represent the alcohol industry. And he says that the IAS, that's the group who've created this, have failed to take into account the significant direct economic contribution of the alcohol industry to the wider economic and social benefits of moderate and responsible alcohol consumption. Well, it's so true, isn't it? We've got a declining birth rate. We need people to get drunk and chat each other up.
Yeah.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody
in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
This is GB News and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but actually it's about you.
And we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear
all sides
as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:26. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, in the last hour, Nigel Farage has announced he'll stand for Reform UK and become the party's leader. To unpack what this and all the campaign activity means for the general election, I'm now joined by the co-founder of JL Partner Polls, Tom Lubbock. Tom, welcome to the show. So a bombshell announcement put the cat amongst the pigeons, specifically on the topic of polling. Does this now mean that all the polls we've seen so far are out of date? What do you think Nigel Farage standing will mean for the various polls moving forward?
The interesting thing, Martin, is that the Reform numbers have been incredibly sticky since Nigel Farage actually said he wasn't going to be the leader. He was going to help with the campaign, but he wasn't going to be the leader. And people assumed, I think quite rightly, that the Conservatives would start to squeeze that Reform vote, but it just hasn't happened. They've been incredibly sticky. And so I think to predict what exactly is going to happen next would take some chutzpah from pollsters who said the numbers might be squeezed after he wouldn't stand for Reform. But I think you have to say this isn't great news for the Conservatives. He will take votes from Labour. We don't know how many. Some of our polling from before the campaign started showed that he'd take evenly from the Labour Party and the Conservatives in terms of what he would top up for Reform. But you have to say this isn't great news for the Conservatives.
So, Tom, a JL Partners poll for GB News you did earlier, last few days, had the Labour Party on 46% with GB News viewers, +7. Reform, as you said, on 18%, -2. How do you anticipate that may change after today's announcement from Nigel Farage?
Yeah, I think, you'd expect those numbers amongst your viewers to go up a bit. I think what that poll shows more than anything is your viewers actually look like the nation as a whole and that Labour are actually ahead. And so, Labour need to pay attention to channels like yours where, there's significant numbers of their voters watching you today.
And another poll just landed in the last half hour or so from Sky News. It's, again, grim reading for the Conservative Party. Labour on 422 seats. That's a majority of 194, an astonishing swing from where we were in 2019. The Conservatives on 140, losing 232. An SNP wipeout, 17, losing 31 seats. Tom Lubbock, does this mean, in your opinion, as an expert pollster, we are moving into an uncharted territory of extraordinary political volatility?
I mean, we are in a highly volatile environment, but I would just say that the Conservatives, that is a bigger majority than Tony Blair won in 1997, but it's not wipeout territory for the Conservatives. They would still hold on to enough seats to be by far and away His Majesty's opposition. And so I think actually it's not a terrible result for the Conservatives compared to, some of the forecasts we've seen going into this election. What now with this Nigel Farage announcement, whether they can hold on to more than 100 seats is what we'll be watching for. But, the Conservative Party on 160 seats, 180 seats, 200 seats, 120, does it matter? They're still in a position to rebuild. What they want to avoid at all costs is going below that 100 seats, that kind of almost total wipeout, which splits the party, which really leaves them with just a fragment of what they had before. And that is what I would be most worried about if I was a Conservative MP, supporter, councillor. That's what I'd be looking for.
So an extraordinary situation, Tom Lubbock, where losing 232 seats for the Conservatives and keeping hold of 140 isn't necessarily the worst case scenario for them. They might actually be quite happy because it's not less than 100 seats. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's where we are now, Martin. There are obviously three results that they'd be looking for. A hung parliament would obviously be the best case scenario. Getting over that 200 seats or around that 200 seat mark would be the second. And then the third is that kind of wipeout territory. And I think, you know, all of them are probably still in play, given looking at our modelling. But it's looking more likely that we're getting to the bottom end of that range rather than the top end.
OK, superb. So thanks for joining us. That's Tom Lubbock, the co-founder of JO Partner Polls. Thank you for your expert insight as ever. And now we're going to get lots more reactions to today's huge news regarding Nigel Farage. A little later this hour, I'll get Labour's reaction by speaking to a member of the shadow cabinet. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
The headlines this hour. Nigel Farage has said he'll stand as the Reform UK parliamentary candidate for Clacton in Essex in the general election in July. Speaking at a news conference in London a short time ago to confirm his change of heart, Mr Farage also announced he'll take over as leader of the party.
So I am going to stand in this election. I'll be launching my candidacy at midday tomorrow in the Essex seaside town of Clacton. So midday tomorrow, Clacton, at the end of the pier.
Also in the news today, the Conservatives have been accused of phony culture wars after announcing plans to amend the Equality Act. The proposals would make clear sex means biological sex rather than gender and would stipulate those who are biologically male but identify as female should be barred from using single-sex spaces. Labour called the policy an election distraction, but the Prime Minister says the safety and security of women and girls means the current confusion over the legal definition can't be allowed to continue. And Sir Keir Starmer says the Labour Party will never shy away from doing its duty at home and abroad. And national security, he said, and economic security must go hand in hand. He's reiterated Labour's commitment to maintaining the UK's nuclear capability. The Labour leader has pledged a deterrent triple lock, which includes the construction of 4 new nuclear submarines and an ambition to increase defence spending when economic conditions allow, he added. He says a changed Labour Party has moved on from the Jeremy Corbyn era. And the Lib Dems have announced new protections for rivers and coastlines as part of their manifesto. It'll include a blue flag status for rivers, which would set legally binding targets to prevent the dumping of sewage. The party says water bosses have been able to get away with environmental vandalism by being permitted to pollute waterways under toothless Conservative policies. Those are the headlines. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Taking a look at today's numbers for you now, and the pound buying you $1.2787 and €1.1744. The price of gold is £1,832.52 an ounce. And the FTSE 100 has closed for the day today at 8,262 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Polly. Now, there's only really one story in town today, and it's this, of course. Nigel Farage will stand for Reform UK in Clacton in Essex. He's also the new leader of Reform UK, and I can now be joined to speak to Andy Preston, the former mayor of Middlesbrough. Andy, welcome to the show. Can I get your immediate reaction to that bombshell announcement?
Wow, yeah, what a bombshell. I mean, just when we thought this build-up to the general election was chaotic and full of twists and turns, there's another one. And what's next? I'm very surprised. I didn't think Nigel Farage would take such a big gamble. I think it's a big gamble for him. I think it's far from certain that he'll win. In that seat, you know, the Tories and Labour were very much neck and neck, and I would estimate right now that they're all about Tory Labour reform are probably about evenly matched, and it could go either way. If he loses, I think he loses some credibility. If he wins, he becomes a monstrous hero. So it's going to be really interesting. I think the repercussions of this, should he win, will be huge. And the pressure amongst Tory members to take on a popular leader like Farage will be huge, absolutely huge.
And Andy, the immediate response from the Conservative Party was to go on the offensive against Nigel Farage and say they'll be handing the keys to Labour to rejoin the European Union. They've gone straight for the Brexit card.
To be honest, I think that's silly. I think what's going to happen is Nigel Farage will increase publicity for this election in Clacton. I think the turnout will increase. I think the Tories will lose some votes. I think Labour will lose some but fewer votes. And I think it's going to be close. I think what's going to happen is the Tories are going to lose this anyway. It is a catastrophic situation. The situation for the Tories is far worse than any of us could have possibly dreamt. If it gets slightly worse, is that a problem? No, there's a monstrous rebuild job. I think that where this is really interesting is when the Tories undoubtedly lose, when Rishi Sunak undoubtedly exits the leadership, will the Tories welcome a Nigel Farage figure? He's definitely popular with large numbers of the public. I'm confident that large numbers of the Tory membership like him too. But I have to say, I think while he's a very strong protest politician, being in power is completely different. And I'm not sure he's the right guy for the job in any party. And I think it would damage the Tories going to the right.
And Andy, a lot of people have been pointing out today at the press conference and, of course, over recent weeks and months, Nigel Farage has stood 7 times. He's never succeeded in getting elected. And yet, Andy Preston, we see such massive volatility in politics at the moment. The none of the above party seems to be polling sky high. There's a general feeling of dissatisfaction with the system. Might this time be different, Andy? Or do you think history is going to repeat itself again and Nigel Farage will fail?
I think the odds are probably against him, but what is different this time that's in his favour is that we have got not just a wounded Tory party in Rishi Sunak, but a moribund Rishi Sunak and an absolutely already defeated Tory party. And Labour aren't strong. The Tories aren't bad because Labour are strong. Labour are strong because the Tories are so awful. Labour are not popular either. In this situation, people want someone who stands up and appears to have that leadership quality. My mind goes back to the Tory party conferences. David Cameron was the boss, he was the leader. Boris Johnson would turn up and he had that star quality and people wanted to be around him and have selfies with him. And it's the same with Nigel Farage. And I'm not endorsing Nigel Farage's politics, by the way, but he has undeniably got a star quality that will excite some members of the public, a lot of Tory members who are dissatisfied, and some Tory MPs. So I would say that a reverse takeover of the Conservative Party is definitely on his mind. I would warn the Tories off against it, though.
Well, Andy Preston, fantastic insight, the former Mayor of Middlesbrough. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Wow, that's an extra morsel to play with. Excellent stuff. Now, thanks to everyone who's got in touch with me this afternoon. We'll get your thoughts on Nigel Farage's big announcement very soon.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, my name is Johnny Ratner. Big problems in Staffordshire. The left lane on that 4-lane stretch of the M6 is closed off heading north, where a lorry's broken down at the Stafford services, of course, midway between junction 14 and 15. And long queues through Hertfordshire continue on the A1M heading away from London. Junctions 6 to 7 from Welwyn Garden City up to the Stevenage South exit, where a lane's shut for emergency road repairs on that 2-lane stretch. In Surrey at Ashstead, the A24 is closed following an accident, and there are long queues on the M5 heading north away from Somerset towards Bristol. The left lane's closed about 2 miles south of Portishead Junction 19 following an accident. In Ceredigion, the A44 Aberystwyth is closed for emergency repairs, and there are delays of 40 minutes on trains out of Victoria to Clapham Junction in London following an earlier trespass incident. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
How prevalent is it in those with darker skin, like me?
That's a great question, and it's one that we get a lot.
So your skin tone does affect your risk of skin cancer. People at the most risk are people with lighter skin tones, so light-coloured hair and eyes as well, lots of moles and freckles, a history of sunburn or a family history of skin cancer. But people with darker skin tones can still burn and can still get skin cancer. Anybody can get skin cancer. So I would encourage everybody, regardless of your ethnicity or your skin tone, to think really seriously about taking care when it's sunny. That myth that you've mentioned that Black people can't get skin cancer is really prevalent, and that's something I want to dispel right now, immediately, because more Black people think maybe they can't get skin cancer. That might mean that when they spot something unusual for them, they're less likely to go to the doctor and they're diagnosed later. And when you're diagnosed later, your outcomes do tend to be worse.
So the figures are disturbing that more people are getting skin cancer. But what about outcomes? I mean, if you do get skin cancer, what are your prospects?
So yeah, like you say, this research is a mixed picture. We're seeing incidence, so the number of new cases going up, which is not good news. But there is some good news in that mortality, so whether you're going to die or not, is actually going down. And we think that's partly due to early diagnosis, which I just mentioned is so important. But also research has led to better and kinder treatments, which mean that outcomes are likely to be better. So now if you're diagnosed at the earliest stage, stage 1, with melanoma, actually around 9 in 10 people will survive their disease for 5 years or more.
The People's Channel.
Well, there's only one story in town today, so let's get straight back to it. Nigel Farage will stand for Reform UK in Clacton in Essex, and he's also the new leader of Reform. And I'm joined now by the former Liberal Democrat MP, Norman Baker. Norman, welcome to the show. So the cat has been put amongst the pigeons. Can Nigel Farage do it, or history repeat itself?
Well, he's lost 7 times, but I think this is his best opportunity, to be honest with you, because the Conservatives are on the floor. And there was a poll, of course, in Clacton, which put him about 10% ahead of Giles Watling, the existing Tory MP. So he must have quite a good chance of winning under the circumstances. Now, he's made that calculation himself. And he's got a good chance of winning, otherwise he wouldn't do it. And of course, the fact he's the now leader of Reform again, as it were, is because Reform is not a party as other parties are. It's a private company, and he's a majority shareholder. So he can do what he wants, really, and he's done that today. Feel a bit sorry for Richard Tice, who I think has lent Reform over £1 million. But hey, that's politics for you. The interesting question, Martin, I think, is what impact this has beyond Clacton. I think it will push up the Reform vote in the election, largely at the expense of the Conservatives. So although I think Reform are unlikely to win more than one seat, i.e. Nigel's seat, I think the impact could be to damage the Conservatives quite significantly and give more oomph, if you like, to Labour and the Lib Dems.
And Norman, it was telling that the immediate visceral reaction from the Conservative Party was to say that this would hand the keys to Sir Keir Starmer to allow the UK to rejoin the European Union. Norman, they went straight for the Brexit card.
Well, they did, but I have to say they're wrong on 2 counts. First of all, I think the keys have been handed to Keir Starmer already, really, quite some time ago, or at least not to Keir Starmer and Ed Davey, as a sort of hung parliament. And secondly, Keir Starmer's been pretty clear, much to my disappointment, frankly, that he's not going to go anywhere near the European Union in terms of reversing Brexit. So I think that's an absolute scare story from the Tories, which just simply won't land.
Do you think something is different this time, Norman? There seems to be so much volatility in the polls, and that's before this announcement from Nigel Farage. And Nigel Farage said himself today, I intend to lead a political revolt. He said, nothing works in Britain. People are telling me all over the country a turning of our backs on the status quo is what's needed. Do you think that's true, that he's once again trying to lead this upstarts revolt against the mainstream?
Well, it's certainly true. Nothing much is working. I mean, Britain is falling to bits, whether it's prisoners using plastic forks to get themselves through walls, which is happening in our prisons, or whether it's potholes on the road, the NHS queues. I can go on forever. Britain is not working at the moment. So it's right for someone to come along and make the case for dramatic change. I think the impact will be on the Conservative Party largely after the next election. And the issue will be whether or not the Conservative MPs who are elected are ones to the right of the party who will welcome Nigel Farage into some sort of arrangement, or whether there'll be more moderate, left-leaning Conservative MPs who won't want to touch him with a barge pole. And we won't know that until we see who's been elected after July the 4th.
OK, Norman Baker, we have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us. And I am now joined by Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. Nigel, welcome to the show. So you've put the cat amongst the pigeons, that's for sure, Mr Farage. But can I please put to you the immediate point by the Conservative Party straight away? They were saying you've handed the keys to Sir Keir Starmer to allow Britain to rejoin the European Union.
No, they did that. They did that. With net migration running at $750 million a year, a total betrayal of the Brexit vote. As the MRP poll that was published by Sky News at 5 o'clock shows, with or without me, the election's over anyway. This is about who can form a voice of coherent opposition. And what I'm pretty certain of is the Conservatives and opposition will row with each other, hate each other, maybe even more than they do in government, and say Reform is here to be a voice of opposition and to get ready and prepare and campaign for 2029.
And Nigel, you spoke about voters you met on the campaign trail in both in Skegness and Ashfield. Is it those people that got to you to make you change your mind? A sense of when you're eyeball to eyeball with the electorate, their sense of disappointment in you not standing, is that the key factor that made you stand up this time?
Yeah, I mean, two things really. One, I said I'd do my bit, and goodness me, 6 days last week I was out everywhere doing everything. Question time, you name it, constituencies, Dover, everything. And number one, I think something's going on out there. I think there is the potential for a revolt against the political class is out there in a way I've not seen before. And number two, those people who were part of the People's Army that we built in the UKIP years, they just feel very let down by me. And yesterday at home, yesterday morning, getting this sort of feeling of terrible guilt about what was going on, and I concluded I cannot let these people down. Difficult though it is to fight a seat, be a National Party leader, do all those things, I'm going to give it my absolute best shot.
And Mr Farage, your critics have said many times, and indeed you asked it at the announcement, you've tried 7 times, you haven't succeeded in being elected yet. What's different this time? Do you think the volatility in the electorate? Do you think the appetite for change? Or are you destined to fail once again?
This is ridiculous. This is utterly ridiculous, Martin. You know, when I stood for UKIP in the 1990s, we barely saved, I think one deposit we saved in the whole general election out of hundreds of candidates. So this argument's absolutely, absolutely fallacious. I've stood once, and guess what happened? The Conservatives cheated so badly, one of the party's agents got a 9-month prison sentence suspended. So, don't give me all that rubbish. I'm running, I'm doing it, I hope to win. If I win, I win. If I don't, I don't. The important thing is that Reform gets many, many millions of votes and gets seats in Parliament and starts to build that voice of opposition, a voice that understands how ordinary folk feel, not the Westminster elite.
Mr Farage, can I ask you, people have been saying already, is this thinking chess moves ahead about trying to take over the Conservative Party? Is it about getting elected as a Reform candidate and then crossing the floor to the Conservatives, trying to take over the party from within?
As it stands, there is no Conservative Party. And frankly, Martin, I can't right now see beyond July the 4th.
OK, thank you very much for joining us, Nigel Farage. A delight to have you on the show after that bombshell announcement earlier on. And I'm now joined by Nick Thomas-Symonds, who's the Shadow Minister without portfolio. Nick, welcome to the show. You'd have seen this afternoon's events unfolding. Can I first get your immediate reaction to it?
Well, firstly, Martin, good to join you on your show as always. Look, our message to voters is unchanged. It's the message I've been out delivering on the doorsteps today, in recent days, recent weeks and months, and that is that if you want genuine change, real change, away from the chaos of the Conservatives and their failure over the last 14 years, the only way to do that is to vote Labour. It is a choice at this election between a changed Labour Party under Keir Starmer and 5 more years of chaos, instability and failure under the Conservatives. And that fundamental choice is going to be on the ballot paper on July the 4th. And that, quite frankly, hasn't changed.
Nick, the immediate response from the Conservative Party to Mr Farage's announcement was that this leaves the keys open. It hands the keys to Sir Keir Starmer to rejoin the European Union. You say, can we trust the Labour Party? A lot of people still hark back to the days when Sir Keir Starmer led the People's Vote movement to cancel Brexit.
Well, we've set out that on our relationship with the European Union, there are red lines. We will not rejoin the EU. We will not rejoin the single market. We will not rejoin the customs union. We will not go back to freedom of movement. And that's what we've said consistently. That is our position. And that's what we're saying to the voters at this election. But this election is not about the arguments of the past. This election is about the future. It is about delivering what we've set out are our first steps, from economic stability to investing in GB energy and the jobs of the future, to cracking down on things like antisocial behaviour, creating a border security command in order to deal with the issue of small boats in the English Channel, and investing in our failing public services. Not the fault of the people who work in them, by the way, Martin, but the product of 14 years of the Conservatives. We do want to see more teachers in our schools, and we want to see our waiting lists brought down. That's what our message is to the public, and I look forward to continuing making that case to voters right up until close of poll on the 4th of July.
And Nick, Thomas Simmons, let's talk about defence. Sir Keir Starmer had been out on the stump today trying to convince the electorate that the Labour Party, as you put it, is a change party by promising to back what he calls the nuclear triple lock. I thought triple locks were just for pensions. Now it's also for defence. But a fair criticism might be, Nick, that in the past, Sir Keir Starmer did back that Labour Party of the past. Jeremy Corbyn, in fact, wanted to scrap Trident, get rid of it. Is this once again Sir Keir Starmer merely positioning himself to say what the electorate wants to hear to get elected?
Well, no, and our party policy on nuclear weapons has not changed. In fact, our continuous at-sea deterrent is something that the Shadow Cabinet 100% supports. Indeed, having an independent nuclear deterrent at all is a creation of the post-war Labour government under Clement Attlee, and it was updated both by the governments of Harold Wilson and Tony Blair. So I would argue that it is squarely a part of Labour history, but it's also a central part of the future as well. And if we are to be privileged enough to form a government, its first duty is to keep the country safe, and that continuous at-sea deterrent is central to that. We have a particularly dangerous world at the moment, from the security challenge of China to the illegal Russian invasion of Ukraine to the situation in the Middle East, where indeed our own ships have been threatened in the Red Sea. So in those circumstances, the continuous at-sea deterrent is central, and our commitment to it is unshakable, as Keir Starmer has set out today.
OK, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Nick
Pleasure.
Thomas Simmons is a Shadow Minister without portfolio, and as you said, it's always a delight to have you on the show. Now, quickly before we go, got a quick couple of emails. Patricia says this: now it's getting exciting. I have faith and believe in this country once again. Martin says this: rejoice, this is great news today. I did have my doubts about Nigel's future direction with his obsession with US politics. But Daniel says this: breaking news, Labour will now win in Clacton. So thank you very much for joining me on today's show. That's all from me for now. Jubes & Co is up next. And don't forget to join us from 6 a.m. tomorrow. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel, followed by Britain's Newsroom at 9:30 with Andrew and Bev, and then, of course, Tom and Emily with Good Afternoon Britain from midday. I'll be back tomorrow. It's my mush from 3 p.m. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Wow, what a day. But now it's time for your weather with Alex Birkin.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. It's time for your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. Through the rest of today, it's actually likely to stay mostly dry, but there is some wet weather on the way as we go through tomorrow. Because of a system that's currently out in the Atlantic, this is going to push its way eastwards and then southeastwards across the country as we go through tomorrow. But for the time being, like I said, mostly dry. A few spots of rain perhaps across parts of northern England, Northern Ireland, where there is a decaying front lingering across us. But overnight, most places staying dry with some cloud, a few clear spells perhaps, but some rain then pushing into Northern Ireland as we head towards dawn. Because of the largely cloudy skies, I'm not expecting temperatures to drop a huge amount, generally staying in double figures. If we take a closer look at what we can expect tomorrow morning, then it is going to be a bit of a damper start across parts of Scotland. Some heavy bursts for the far north of Scotland, particularly Orkney, Shetland, could have some downpours here. Elsewhere across much of Scotland, quite a cloudy picture, and there will be outbreaks of rain coming in from the west, drier and brighter towards eastern parts. Also quite cloudy and damp across Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England and into Wales as well, but more central, southern and eastern parts of England actually starting the day on a dry note, and there should even be some sunshine breaking through the cloud at times. We are going to see that rain in the northwest gradually making its way southeastwards, and there could be some heavy downpours mixed in with it, possibly the odd rumble of thunder too. In the southeast, likely to stay pretty dry through much of the day. By the time the rain arrives here, it will have broken up, so it should be mostly light.